Hey guys, tonight we stumble into a windswept corner of Egypt where the desert hums like an endless sleeping beast, and somewhere beneath your sandals lies a block of stone that once held the key to human language. The night air is warm, the kind of heat that clings even after sunset, and you feel grains of sand sticking to your skin like an unwanted second blanket. In your mind, you picture soldiers from Napoleon's expedition 2 centuries ago, digging foundations for a fort at a dusty town called Rosetta, not expecting to unearth the most famous carved rock in history. And yet here it is, a slab of black granodiorite, taller than your torso, heavier than any camel could bear, carved with mysterious letters that look like they should whisper if you tilt your ear close enough. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight and what time it is for you. I love picturing this little caravan of sleepy travelers spread across the planet, checking in from midnight New York, sunrise Tokyo, or the rain-hushed evenings of Sao Paulo. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Rosetta Stone greets you with 3 neat registers of text, 3 different scripts squeezed into one decree, like a cosmic sandwich of meaning. At the top, rows of tight hieroglyphs march like sacred beetles across the stone. In the middle, flowing curves of demotic look like a river in ink. And at the bottom, the crisp alphabet of ancient Greek lays itself out like a polite footnote for scholars. You run your fingers across the grooves, though you probably won't survive this without a splinter of stone dust lodged under your nail. Don't worry, that's part of the initiation. An obvious truth hits you first. This is just a royal decree praising Ptolemy V, a king who wanted his taxes lowered, his temples cared for, and his ego polished. Nothing mystical at all, at least not on the surface. But as you squint at the layers, you notice how strange it is that the decree had to be repeated 3 times, as though someone feared Earth itself might forget. Imagine you are one of Napoleon's weary engineers in 1799. Your boots are filled with sand, your water flask tastes of tin, and your only entertainment is listening to the sound of shovels hitting stone. When the work crew uncovers this slab, you see more than just an obstacle. The French savants, those bookish intellectuals who traveled with the army, lean forward with their powdered wigs slightly askew, eyes glittering in the desert sun. They recognize instantly. This might be the cipher that finally cracks the hieroglyphic code, the dream of scholars since Renaissance Europe rediscovered Egypt's ruins. Quirky tidbit. One of those soldiers may have actually used the stone as part of the wall of the fort before anyone realized its significance. Think about that. Humanity's greatest linguistic artifact serving temporarily as construction filler, like wedging Shakespeare's first folio under a wobbly table leg. Historians still argue whether the find was truly accidental, or whether local guides had long known of its existence and steered the French toward it. Either way, the stone ended up spirited away from Rosetta to Cairo, and eventually, after Britain bested France, carted off to the British Museum where it rests under glass today, surrounded by tourists snapping photos, as if catching a celebrity in pajamas. You linger on its surface, marveling at the precision of the chiseling. The hieroglyphs glint like little constellations caught in basalt, their owls, snakes, and eyes carved so meticulously that they almost blink under your gaze. The demotic script flows with speed, shorthand born of bureaucracy and daily life, like sticky notes left for eternity. The Greek sits patiently below, offering scholars the lifeline they would need. But you sense something else humming. 3 scripts, 1 message. Why does that feel like an echo of cosmic communication? Like the universe itself trying to leave us redundant translations in case one language failed? Stars, after all, twinkle in light, in radiation, in gravity waves, different registers of one decree written by the cosmos. Maybe the Rosetta Stone is not just a decree of a king, but also a model of how the universe sends meaning across gulfs of ignorance. The night grows cooler, and a breeze brushes against your face as you imagine the priests of Memphis chiseling this decree in 196 BC. They weren't simply writing. They were anchoring royal authority in stone, much like astronomers anchor their calendars in the rising of Sirius. There's a strange overlap here, stone and sky, king and cosmos, decree, and star chart. You can almost hear the scraping of copper chisels on basalt, a rhythm steady as heartbeat, punctuated by the occasional priest muttering about lunch. Another obvious truth. No priest at that time imagined a Frenchman named Champollion would someday risk his health and sanity deciphering these lines, nor that English tourists would one day crowd around it in London gift shops, buying Rosetta Stone mugs. They just wanted their king respected and their temples exempt from tax. Yet in chasing mundane goals, they left behind a puzzle that would reshape our understanding of ancient Egypt and, maybe, of the universe itself. A fringe whisper creeps into your ear. Some have claimed the stone is far older than official timelines admit, perhaps a remnant of a civilization that predated the pharaohs. These theories lack hard evidence, but they appeal to that insomniac corner of your mind that enjoys the idea of hidden epics and forgotten translators. Could the slab be a recycled relic, its surface repurposed, its symbols echoing astronomical charts disguised as royal propaganda? You notice how the chipped corner of the stone looks almost like a crescent moon. The roughness contrasts with the precision of the carving, a reminder that even eternal decrees suffer from the hammering of history. Touching it, you feel the coolness of basalt, but also the weight of questions pressing into your palm. You realize something calming. Decoding is a universal human habit. From toddlers pointing at clouds and seeing animals, to physicists interpreting faint radio pulses from space, we are all translators of the universe's scribbles. The Rosetta Stone just happens to be the most glamorous version of that tendency. A joke sneaks in. Imagine if aliens ever visited Earth and stumbled across the stone. They'd probably be thrilled. Finally, proof the humans were trying to translate cosmic grammar. Then they'd read the actual decree about tax breaks for priests and mutter, "Well, that was disappointing." The desert wind gusts again, carrying the smell of dust and faint salt from the Nile Delta. You imagine yourself lying back under Egyptian stars, with the Rosetta Stone beside you like a pillow too hard to sleep on. Your eyelids droop, but your curiosity keeps them open. Somewhere in those inscriptions, you sense, is a conversation between humanity and the cosmos, a code written in triplicate, urging you to listen more closely. The desert has its own voice. It's the low murmur of sand shifting under invisible winds, the creak of your sandals as you step closer to the black slab half buried in grit, the faint crackle of history trying to whisper through stone. When you lean close to the Rosetta Stone, the surface gleams like obsidian, but you know it isn't obsidian at all. It's granodiorite, a volcanic cousin of granite, speckled with crystals you can't see unless the light hits at a certain angle. They say it weighs over 750 kilograms, which means you and 10 of your sleepiest friends couldn't budge it even if you all pretended you were lifting at the gym. And yet, the stone radiates a strange intimacy, like it's lighter than air, like it wants to be carried not by arms but by imagination. The first impression is always physical. You see a slab about 114 centimeters high, 72 wide, 28 thick. Not much bigger than a tabletop, yet dense with grooves that tell a 1,000-year story. An obvious truth. This is no polished jewel. It's chipped, scarred, and broken at the top, as if some careless mason once dropped it. The missing piece frustrates you, because you know what was there once. The upper hieroglyphs, perhaps some crucial cosmic metaphor, or just another royal Ptolemy, is awesome line. Scholars still argue whether the missing text contained hidden astronomical formulas or simply more of the same decrees about taxes and temples. You sigh, because human history is always half a jigsaw puzzle. The surface itself seems to breathe. The hieroglyphs sparkle like insect wings, hawks staring at you, snakes coiling mid-strike, circles glowing like little suns. These are the images the priests considered sacred, a visual language where a bird could mean a sound, a concept, or even a god. Below that, the demotic characters flow with a quickness that feels modern, almost casual, like somebody jotting notes for a meeting. Pharaoh says temples exempt, don't forget. It's quirky to think of this middle script as the shorthand of ancient Egypt, like the cursive we groaned about in school, except there's carried the fate of kings. Then, of course, the Greek. Calm, orderly, a tidy code for scholars. You know the French savants must have cheered when they saw it, because it meant this was a stone with built-in subtitles. You trail your hand down the grooves and imagine the chiseling itself. Copper or bronze tools, swung with patience, striking the stone again and again until words emerged. Think about that. No power drills, no lasers, just sweat and repetition. The sound would have echoed like a drum, each tap a heartbeat in the workshop of eternity. Another obvious truth. Carving into granodiorite is agony. It's so tough that even modern stonecutters groan when asked to shape it. Whoever did this work must have been stubborn, reverent, or both. There's a cosmic joke in that. The decree was about priests exempting themselves from taxes, but the poor artisans chiseling the words into stone definitely didn't get exempt from sore arms. You can almost hear one of them muttering, "Great, the king saves money, and I get blisters." But the stone isn't just about pain and bureaucracy. As you step back, you notice its color in moonlight, a deep black sheen, dotted with tiny specks that reflect like stars on a night sky. The more you stare, the more it feels intentional. Was it coincidence that the decree was carved into a stone that looks like a miniature galaxy? Historians still argue whether the choice of rock was practical, just what was available, or symbolic, chosen because its dark surface mirrored the heavens. You tilt your head, imagining priests pointing at the slab under torchlight, the glyphs glittering like constellations while they murmured invocations. A fringe tidbit drifts into your thoughts. Some fringe theorists claim the Rosetta Stone wasn't chosen randomly at all, but deliberately selected to act as a cosmic mirror. They say granodiorite, with its high quartz content, might even store vibrations, like a crude recorder of chants. Imagine if you could press your ear against it and hear faint echoes of voices from 2,200 years ago. You know that's not proven science, but it's oddly soothing to imagine the stone itself as a cassette tape of starlit hymns. The night breeze brushes your cheek, carrying Nile moisture, and suddenly you see the stone less as an object and more as a participant. It's not inert, it's been shuffled, lifted, stolen, fought over, and gawked at for centuries. A survivor of empires, it has soaked up layers of meaning. French soldiers saw it as a military prize. Scholars saw it as a codebook. Tourists see it as a selfie backdrop. You, however, can't shake the feeling that it was always meant to be a message not just from a king, but from the cosmos. An obvious truth presses again. No one at Rosetta in 1799 thought they were holding something cosmic. To them, it was dusty and heavy, another artifact for Napoleon's loot train. And yet, here you are centuries later, staring at it as if it's a blackboard chalked by the universe itself. That gap between mundane decree and cosmic speculation is where the real magic hums. Your eyelids dip, your breathing slows. You imagine lying beside the stone under a desert sky, listening to crickets sing. The carved lines become rivers, flowing downward to the Greek letters like tributaries into a sea. You feel your mind drifting, translating not words but sensations, hardness, shimmer, weight, silence. You realize that the stone doesn't just communicate with language, it speaks through its physicality, its very mineral form. Another little joke, you think of modern language apps named Rosetta Stone. Somewhere out there, someone is practicing Spanish by tapping their phone screen, while the original slab sits in a glass case, probably shaking its head. Really? I helped decode hieroglyphs, and now I'm teaching tourists how to order tapas. The cosmic whisper returns. 3 scripts carved for 1 decree. Why? Was it to unify Egypt's elites, priests, and Greek administrators? Or was it a symbolic gesture, mimicking the way stars shine in multiple wavelengths? Historians still argue whether it was pragmatic governance or layered spiritual theater. You know both could be true, because human motives are rarely single-threaded. Kings loved taxes, but they also loved the sky. Priests loved exemptions, but they also loved symbolism. People carved meaning into stone, but they also carved stone into meaning. The desert hush deepens. You press your palm flat against the cold surface, closing your eyes. In that instant, you feel the Rosetta Stone as both monument and mirror, a weighty object, yet also a feather-light symbol. And in its black gleam, you almost catch a reflection of stars, as if the cosmos itself once stopped by, scribbled a note in 3 languages, and left it for you to find. You linger longer than you thought you would, your eyes adjusting to the patterns etched across the Rosetta Stone's surface. Three separate bands of script march across its body like ribbons of time. At first, it feels like a messy duplication. Why carve the same decree 3 times? But the more you dwell on it, the more you sense it wasn't redundancy, it was orchestration. You're standing before what feels less like a rock and more like a choir. 3 voices harmonizing in different registers, yet singing the same melody. At the top sit the hieroglyphs, the oldest and most cryptic of the 3. To your sleepy eyes, they look like a wallpaper of little creatures. Falcons staring as though mid-flight, snakes frozen in curves that could either be warnings or lullabies, and reeds that look like they've been plucked from the Nile and pressed flat into stone. There's something sacred about them, something that makes you straighten your posture a little, as if a priest might walk past at any moment and glare at you for slouching in front of holy text. An obvious truth rises. Hieroglyphs weren't invented for casual grocery lists. They belonged to the gods, the temples, and the tomb walls meant to outlast entire civilizations. Directly below runs the demotic script. If hieroglyphs are the cathedral, demotic is the village market. Curves and loops tumble into each other like ink scribbles written at speed, a script born for day-to-day life. Contracts, receipts, complaints, maybe even those ancient breakup notes that start with, "It's not you, it's R.A." It's easy to imagine a scribe dipping his reed pen, jotting the same shapes on papyrus as a quick reminder about grain deliveries. The demotic on the Rosetta Stone ties the lofty decree to the real world. Temples exempt from taxes weren't just cosmic honors. They were economic maneuvers. And then, anchoring it all, is the Greek. It sits patiently at the bottom, neat lines of letters you could sound out if you squinted hard enough. This was the language of administration under the Ptolemies, descendants of Alexander the Great's conquests. You might say the Greek version was the press release, clear to officials who needed to enforce the decree. Quirky tidbit. Greek scholars later leaned so hard on this section that they sometimes forgot the stone wasn't written for them at all. It was written for Egyptians, in their scripts, in their world. The Greek was simply the bureaucratic guarantee. You take a step back and realize, 3 bands, 3 worlds. Sacred, practical, political. A trinity that somehow mirrors the very structure of existence. Historians still argue whether this triple writing was just smart governance, making sure everyone understood the same royal decree, or whether it carried symbolic weight, binding heaven, earth, and society in one stone document. The cosmic in you wants to believe the latter, that this was more than redundancy, that it was a deliberate echo of the layered cosmos Egyptians believed in. Another obvious truth emerges as you rub your eyes. You're not fluent in any of these scripts. The hieroglyphs stare back with silent judgment. The demotic squiggles might as well be tangled shoelaces. And while the Greek feels friendlier, your vocabulary maxes out at alpha, beta, maybe delta. Yet, strangely, you still feel included. The visual rhythm of repetition itself is a kind of language, a pattern your brain interprets as emphasis. It's like the universe underlining a sentence in 3 colors just to make sure you don't miss it. A light joke creeps in. Imagine if your phone notifications came like this: 1 in emojis, 1 in shorthand, and 1 in full essay form. You'd roll your eyes, but you'd also never forget to buy milk again. There's also something hypnotic about seeing them side by side. You sense the invisible translators standing between each line, bridging meaning from falcon to loop to alpha. In your imagination, they're like cosmic interpreters at a conference where the universe itself is the keynote speaker. And isn't that what humans always do? We're forever layering meanings, ensuring nothing gets lost in translation between gods and mortals, kings and scribes, starlight and human eyes. A fringe theory dances at the edge of your thoughts. Some claim the stone's triple language wasn't about accessibility at all, but about proving that meaning transcends form. In that view, the stone wasn't just a decree. It was a statement that truth, like starlight, can shine through different filters yet remain unchanged. Whether or not you buy that, you can't help feeling the resonance. The desert night presses closer, cooler now, the stars wheeling overhead in their own triple bands. The brilliant ones you notice first, the faint ones your eyes catch later, and the invisible ones only radio telescopes can hear. You smile at the symmetry. 3 bands of sky, 3 bands of stone. Coincidence? Maybe. But coincidences in Egypt always feel a little staged. Another obvious truth: repetition is power. Humans chant, write in triplicate, and mark the same decree in stone not because they love redundancy, but because they know memory is fragile. The Rosetta Stone exists because someone feared forgetting. And yet, ironically, it lay forgotten itself until French soldiers stumbled across it. The universe is funny like that. You let your hand drift across the grooves again. The hieroglyphs feel sharp, the demotic smoother, the Greek precise. Three textures of meaning under your palm. It's like touching different instruments in an orchestra: the deep drumbeat of hieroglyphs, the quick flute of demotic, the steady violin of Greek, all playing one decree that somehow manages to be both mundane and monumental. Another little joke tickles you. If this were written today, it would probably come with a QR code at the bottom. Maybe future archaeologists will dig up our parking meters and declare them cosmic artifacts. The stone doesn't laugh, but it doesn't need to. Its silence is full, layered, comfortable. You step back, glance at its three registers again, and realize you're not just looking at translations. You're looking at humanity's oldest attempt to say, "This matters so much, we're going to make sure everyone gets it." Whether they were priests or peasants, Greeks or Egyptians, they couldn't escape the stone's decree. Neither can you. And so you stand there, the hum of three languages pressing against your ears, the stars above nodding in recognition. You wonder if the cosmos does the same, repeating its truths in light, in gravity, in whispers of background radiation, waiting for you to tune in. You're still rubbing the sleep dust from your eyes when you realize the story of the Rosetta Stone could have ended before it even began. Picture it. The summer of 1799, Napoleon's troops stumbling through Egypt, hot, hungry, and not particularly thrilled to be thousands of miles away from home. The French army wasn't just about muskets and cannons. It had a little intellectual entourage: engineers, mathematicians, botanists, what Napoleon called his savants. Their job was to measure, sketch, and catalog Egypt's wonders, as if colonial conquest could be dressed up in curiosity. You can almost hear them grumble, their powdered wigs itching under desert sun, muttering, "We came for science, not sand fleas." The French were building a fort near Rosetta, modern Rashid, on the Nile Delta, carving foundations into ground that was equal parts dirt and buried history. An obvious truth: Egypt's soil is like a stubborn time capsule. Dig anywhere deep enough, and you'll likely hit a shard of pottery, a stone lintel, or, if you're extraordinarily lucky, the linguistic key to an entire civilization. On that July day, the soldiers' shovels struck something hard. At first, it was just another chunk of black stone. But as they cleared away the grit, lines of strange carvings emerged, three neat panels etched into its face. Imagine the scene: sweaty soldiers, irritated officers, and one or two savants leaning in with scholarly gasps. Quirky tidbit: accounts suggest the stone was first treated like rubble, possibly destined to be built straight into the fort's wall. If not for the curiosity of Lieutenant Pierre-François Bouchard, who recognized its potential, the Rosetta Stone might have ended up hidden in masonry, forgotten under cannon fire. Sometimes history hinges on a single person noticing that a rock is more than a rock. Historians still argue whether the discovery was pure chance or the result of local workers pointing it out. Some believe Egyptian laborers knew it was significant but kept quiet until the French noticed. Others insist it was truly random, the kind of accident archaeologists secretly dream about. Either way, the stone's unearthing was one of those cosmic jokes. The French came seeking strategic advantage, and instead, they handed the world a breakthrough in human knowledge. You picture the savants brushing the dirt off, marveling as the hieroglyphs shimmered in sunlight. Did their hearts race, realizing this could unlock Egypt's secrets? Or did they just shrug, noting it down for later cataloging, unaware of the scholarly obsession it would ignite? An obvious truth here: the French were not the best at safeguarding Egypt's treasures. They carted artifacts left and right, sometimes breaking them in transport, sometimes sketching them badly. But with the Rosetta Stone, their timing was uncanny. And yet, history is rarely neat. By 1801, Napoleon's dream of dominating Egypt collapsed. The French surrendered to the British, and with the treaty, the Rosetta Stone was handed over as spoils of war. That means the most important artifact for decoding hieroglyphs changed hands not because of scholarship, but because of gunpowder and politics. Another cosmic irony: one empire's loss became another empire's gain, while the stone itself sat silently, indifferent to national flags. A little joke nudges you. Imagine the Rosetta Stone itself watching the French and British squabble over it, rolling its non-existent eyes, whispering, "Guys, I just want to be read." Still, those first moments in 1799 mattered most. You can almost feel Bouchard's pride when he reported the find to Napoleon. The general, known for his ego as much as his tactics, must have relished the thought of being linked to such a discovery. He wanted Egypt not only conquered but intellectually claimed. The savants scrambled to copy the inscriptions, making plaster casts and sketches so they could be studied even if the original was lost. An obvious truth. Had they not done so, the fragile chance to decode hieroglyphs might have slipped away forever. There's something cosmic in the way discoveries happen. A French army seeking victory ends up stumbling across a decree from a boy king, carved 2 millennia earlier. The decree itself wasn't meant for the French, nor the British, nor the modern world. It was propaganda frozen in basalt, praising Ptolemy V and securing the loyalty of priests. But because of accident and conquest, it became the bridge that carried meaning across centuries. A fringe tidbit floats in. Some theorists like to imagine the discovery wasn't an accident at all, that perhaps the stone surfaced when humanity was ready. You smirk at the mystical phrasing, but part of you enjoys the thought. It's not unlike how comets arrive, suddenly reminding Earth that the cosmos has a timetable of its own. You crouch, brush the sand off your knees, and see it in your mind. The stone lying in darkness for centuries, waiting patiently under layers of Nile silt and village dust. Soldiers digging for walls disturbed its sleep, and now it sits awake, glaring at the world with those silent scripts. You can't help but feel you've walked into a cosmic setup, as though the universe planted it in Rosetta centuries earlier, knowing someone would stumble upon it when the time was right. The desert night presses cooler, stars blinking above as if nodding agreement. You feel the weight of chance, how fragile it all was. If the soldiers had missed it by a meter, if the stone had been smashed for building material, if no savant had cared enough to preserve it, you wouldn't be standing here, brushing your hand across this carved mirror of time. An obvious truth: accidents shape history as much as intentions. From penicillin growing in a forgotten petri dish to microwave ovens born from radar, discoveries often slip in sideways. The Rosetta Stone is one more reminder that sometimes the universe enjoys hiding meaning in plain sight, waiting for us to dig. You smile in the dark, hearing the faint clink of spades, the gasp of discovery, the shuffle of French boots on sand. The stone had waited for millennia, and on that hot July day, it finally stepped back into the world's gaze. And now, it's staring at you too. The desert hush lingers as you imagine yourself not among French soldiers this time, but among the scribes of pharaohs who lived 2,000 years earlier, back when the Rosetta Stone was first conceived. The year is 196 BC, and Ptolemy V, a young king barely a teenager, has just survived political upheaval, revolts, and the constant hum of an empire that doesn't always want to listen. The priests of Egypt gather to compose a decree in his honor, words that will secure their privileges and, more importantly, secure his legitimacy. Picture the scene: a dim temple hall where incense smoke curls upward, where oil lamps flicker against massive columns carved with gods who have stared down centuries. A cluster of scribes sit cross-legged on woven mats, each with reed pens tucked into their belts, their hands stained dark with ink. In front of them lies papyrus, not stone yet, because drafts must be composed, revised, and polished before anyone dares to carve permanence into basalt. Their voices murmur, weighing each phrase. The king is great. The king is generous. The temples will remain free from burdensome taxes. You roll your eyes just a little, because obvious truth: propaganda is as old as rulers. But what fascinates you is the sheer labor behind every letter. When you eventually see those carved falcons and snakes on the Rosetta Stone, it's easy to forget they started here, as brushstrokes of ink on papyrus, scribbled by men who knew the weight of words. Quirky tidbit: Ancient Egyptian scribes were so revered that they sometimes had their own little statues made, seated with a papyrus scroll across their knees. Imagine being honored for taking notes so well that people carve you into eternity. Makes you rethink your own messy grocery list. Historians still argue whether the decree was more about religion or politics. Was it mainly priests ensuring their tax-free status, or was it truly an attempt to unite a kingdom under a young king's shaky rule? Both seem likely. The decree talks of honoring temples and reducing burdens, but it also makes Ptolemy sound like a divine benefactor. To the priests, this was more than an economic perk. It was aligning themselves with royal power and, by extension, the gods. Now step into the workshop where stonecutters translate those papyrus drafts into grooves. Imagine the clang of hammer on chisel, sparks bouncing as copper bites into basalt. They worked in teams, one tapping steady, the other holding the tool against the stone. Over hours, days, maybe weeks, words that once lived on fragile papyrus become immortal scratches on rock. You picture sweat dripping down their brows, the rhythm of hammering echoing like a drumbeat through the hot chamber. Another obvious truth: mistakes weren't easily erased. Unlike our digital backspace key, an error on stone meant either chiseling deeper or starting over. That's why the lines look so deliberate, so careful. Every symbol was a gamble. Every stroke meant to last centuries. And yet, centuries later, you stand before it with sleep-heavy eyes, reading not so much their words but their determination. You lean closer, and the hieroglyphs don't feel random anymore. The falcon, yes, Horus, protector of kings. The snake, maybe a cobra, a sign of power. The reeds and suns and seated figures form a grammar that's half story, half spell. To the scribes, writing was never just recording, it was creating reality. Write that the king is divine, and in a way, you make him divine. You catch yourself smiling. Modern advertising works exactly the same way. A sneaker ad says the shoe will make you faster, and suddenly you believe it when you run. A fringe tidbit sneaks in. Some esoteric groups today claim the Rosetta Stone wasn't just political decree, but a coded ritual text, aligning priestly power with the stars. They point to recurring hieroglyphs shaped like suns, moons, and animals linked to constellations. Whether that's intentional or coincidence, you can't say. But it's comforting to think of those scribes gazing at the night sky for inspiration, then dipping their reeds into ink to anchor starlight into words. As you breathe deeply, the faint scent of imaginary temple incense lingers in your nostrils. You realize how cyclical it all feels. Priests wrote to honor kings. Kings relied on priests to sanctify their rule. Scribes etched the alliance into stone. And you, centuries later, lean over glass in a museum, trying to make sense of it all. Another obvious truth: human power always needs paperwork. Without scribes, decrees dissolve. Without decrees, kings fade. You close your eyes and hear the rhythm again. Tap, tap, tap of the chisel. It's a lullaby of sorts, the sound of permanence being forged. The scribes weren't just bureaucrats. They were midwives of meaning, delivering ideas into forms that could outlast the bodies that spoke them. Maybe that's why they were revered, why statues of scribes were tucked into tombs. They gave eternity a vocabulary. And here's a joke to lighten it. Somewhere, one of those scribes probably grumbled, "Why can't we just write this once? Why 3 times? Hieroglyphs, Demotic, Greek. It's like they don't trust anyone to read." And another scribe must have shrugged. "More work for us, less tax for them. Fair trade." The temple lamps dim in your imagination. The scribes roll up their papyri, and the stonecutters put away their tools. The Rosetta Stone is finished, one of many decrees, just another block to be erected in a temple courtyard. But the priests knew, the scribes knew, and maybe the stone itself knew, that words carved in triplicate could echo longer than they ever dreamed. The desert outside is quiet. You inhale the silence, then exhale slowly. The decree may have been written for priests and kings, but somehow, across time, it was written for you too. The stone's surface gleams under your fingertips, and as you drift deeper into its story, the bottom band of text tugs your attention. Greek, orderly, measured, and strangely familiar, like an old classmate you can't quite place but swear you've met before. Compared to the wild hieroglyphic animals and the rushing cursive of Demotic, The Greek portion feels like someone has switched on subtitles in a foreign film. It's a reminder that, in the 3rd century BC, Egypt wasn't just Egyptian anymore. It was part of a hybrid world, ruled by Ptolemaic kings descended from Alexander the Great. Obvious truth: when you conquer a place, you bring your language with you. The Ptolemies imported Greek administration into Egypt like travelers dragging luggage into a hotel that didn't really fit their style. The Egyptian temples carried on with hieroglyphs, the bustling bazaars scrawled in Demotic, but the government offices clicked along in Greek, neat as an accountant's ledger. The Rosetta Stone is a snapshot of that 3-layered society, like 3 radio stations broadcasting simultaneously in the same city. Picture the scholars centuries later who first leaned on this Greek section like it was a lifeline. They couldn't crack hieroglyphs or Demotic, but Greek they could handle. Quirky tidbit: some of those early academics assumed hieroglyphs weren't even phonetic at all, that they were mystical symbols, each representing an idea or cosmic truth. To them, a falcon didn't mean Horus or but something abstract like divinity in avian form. Imagine their surprise when Jean-François Champollion later proved that hieroglyphs had sounds like an alphabet. They must have felt like someone had just told them cat's meow instead of reciting poetry. Historians still argue whether the Greek version was meant primarily for the Egyptian population's Greek-speaking elite or for the foreign administrators who kept Ptolemaic control running smoothly. Either way, it was practical. Without Greek, the decree might have been trapped in the temple walls, unreadable to the very rulers who relied on Egypt's priests to legitimize them. You pause, tilt your head, and realize something: Greek, here, isn't just a translation. It's a key, a wedge hammered between the mystery of hieroglyphs and the minds of future scholars. Without it, the Rosetta Stone might be nothing more than a decorated slab admired for aesthetics. The Greek script is what let humanity finally pull the zipper open on a language that had been silent for 1,400 years. But the Greek text itself doesn't look cosmic at first glance. It's pragmatic, bureaucratic, no more poetic than a city council memo. Yet, hidden in its neat lines is the echo of something larger: the way cultures overlap, the way empires layer themselves like sediment. That's an obvious truth. No society ever stands alone. Egypt under the Ptolemies was Egyptian, yes, but also Greek, a mix of gods and gymnasiums, papyrus and parchment, falcons and olive wreaths. Here's a little joke that pops into your head. If the stone were carved today, you'd probably see it in 3 scripts too: hieroglyphs for the sacred vibe, emojis for the demotic shorthand, and Times New Roman for the Greek bureaucracy. Imagine tourists staring at a solemn decree that ends with smiling face with smiling eyes sparkles, prohibited money bagged. The Greek portion on the stone reads like any royal decree. It praises Ptolemy V for his generosity, lists out benefits for temples, and demands everyone honors the king. But the fact that this praise had to exist in 3 scripts says something cosmic about human communication. We've always been terrified of being misunderstood. The priests didn't want anyone missing the message. Whether you were literate in hieroglyphs, comfortable in Demotic, or schooled in Greek, you couldn't escape the king's words. A fringe tidbit whispers: some alternative theorists argue that the 3 scripts were less about accessibility and more about binding cultures together, a symbolic unification of Egypt's spiritual, social, and foreign realms. To them, the decree isn't just politics. It's ritual magic, weaving a trilingual spell to stabilize a fractured land. Whether that's credible or not, you admit it feels strangely satisfying. The stone hums like a chord rather than a single note. You close your eyes for a moment, and the Greek letters blur into constellations. Alpha and Omega drift across the sky like stars, merging with hieroglyphic falcons and demotic swirls. You wonder if this was accidental or deliberate. Did the scribes imagine the Greek as cosmic symbols too, or only as administrative clarity? Historians still argue whether the Greeks themselves saw hieroglyphs as sacred images beyond mere writing, treating them with awe while secretly relying on their own alphabet for real work. Obvious truth, whispered by the desert night. Practicality and poetry always live side by side. The Greek text is pragmatic, yet its very existence in the stone turned out to be poetic centuries later when it unlocked a lost language. What once was bureaucracy became miracle. The air around you feels cooler now, the kind of cool that nudges you toward sleep. You imagine yourself back in the British Museum, glass glare reflecting off the stone while a crowd pushes forward to snap their obligatory selfies. None of them notice that at the bottom of this slab, in plain Greek, the cosmic lockpick of history rests quietly, almost smug. Another joke occurs to you. If Champollion had had Google Translate, he would have cracked the hieroglyphs in a weekend instead of spending his life on them. But then again, without the struggle, we wouldn't feel the triumph. You let your fingers linger at the bottom band of text, feeling grooves that once seemed ordinary but now pulse with hidden consequence. The Greek may look dull, but it was the spark that lit the fire of decipherment. And in that realization, you sense something greater. Sometimes the universe hides its biggest gifts in the most boring packaging. The middle band of the stone calls to you next, that flowing script that looks like cursive racing across the basalt. Demotic, its name literally means of the people. Not sacred like the hieroglyphs, not orderly like the Greek, but the in-between, the everyday tongue of contracts, grain receipts, letters, and temple ledgers. To your drowsy eyes, it resembles strands of rope tangled together, some lines neat, others sprawling, as if the scribe was running out of ink but didn't want to stop mid-sentence. An obvious truth. Languages evolve whether kings like it or not. Hieroglyphs were the formal language, proud and ancient, but they were cumbersome. Imagine writing your shopping list with little owls and snakes every time you needed bread. Over centuries, scribes shortened, streamlined, simplified. What had once been the hieratic script morphed into Demotic. By the time of the Rosetta Stone, Demotic was the language of daily Egypt. If you had to sue your neighbor for stealing goats, it'd be in Demotic. If you scribbled "back soon" on a scrap of pottery shard, it'd be in Demotic. Quirky tidbit. Some Demotic graffiti has survived on temple walls, little doodles from bored priests or workers. Imagine traveling through time only to find that humans, whether in 196 BC or 2025 AD, always sneak in bathroom stall commentary. You smile, because it makes the stone feel suddenly human, not distant priests or conquerors, but people just like you, jotting in their shorthand. Still, scholars squint at this script like it's the middle child craving recognition. Hieroglyphs hog the drama, Greek gets the credit for the breakthrough, but Demotic is the glue in between. Historians still argue whether the Demotic portion was meant for merchants and the working classes, or whether only temple scribes really cared. The truth is probably messy. Demotic may have been accessible, but literacy was still rare. Perhaps only a select few could actually stand before the decree and murmur its meaning. You run your eyes across the curves and realize the Demotic script almost looks like sound waves frozen in rock. That thought sticks, the language of people caught like an echo, permanent where voices vanish. It's strange comfort. Words spoken in a marketplace disappear, but chiseled Demotic endures across millennia. Here's a little joke. If hieroglyphs are the full opera, and Greek is the official press release, then Demotic is the sticky note someone left on the fridge. Remember, Pharaoh's awesome. Temples don't pay taxes, but don't underestimate the sticky note. In some ways, Demotic is the most alive of the three scripts, because it vibrates with practicality. It's the everyday breath of a culture, proof that the decree wasn't just divine thunder, but also a matter of balancing temple books and treasury coffers. Obvious truth again. Behind every sacred ritual is someone quietly keeping the receipts. A fringe tidbit slips in. Some alternative thinkers claim Demotic encodes more than human chatter, that its looping forms hide references to cycles of the Nile, lunar phases, even hints of astronomical rhythm. They argue that Demotic scribes carried cosmic knowledge in shorthand, slipping it into decrees like secret footnotes. You tilt your head. Whether or not that's true, it feels poetic. After all, what better place to hide cosmic truths than in the script people considered mundane? As you imagine the chiseling of the Demotic portion, you hear the hammer strikes again. Faster now, less solemn than the hieroglyphs but more hurried, as if the artisans were relieved to carve something simpler. Their strokes curve and dash, mimicking handwriting rather than artwork. Perhaps they even chatted while working, laughing about food, gossip, or a lazy apprentice. The idea makes you grin. The Rosetta Stone, humanity's great code. may have been created while workers swapped jokes about spilled beer. Historians still argue about the exact pronunciation of Demotic because it lived as a script more than a spoken record. Without recordings, scholars reconstruct sounds by comparison, piecing fragments together like cosmic detectives. You can almost hear their debates echoing in lecture halls. Was that symbol a P or an F? A KH or just a hard H? You smirk, because the stone itself doesn't care. It just keeps holding its groove, unbothered by scholarly squabbles. The night wind brushes your cheek, and you picture demotic letters lifting off the stone like fireflies, buzzing into the dark sky. They swirl above your head, then merge into constellations, forming shapes of rivers and crescents. For a moment, you see them as cosmic shorthand, notes scribbled by the universe itself, abbreviations for truths too vast for full sentences. Another obvious truth: shorthand always hides something. If you weren't in on the code, demotic looked like random loops. The stone itself is a reminder that knowledge often hides in plain sight, needing patient translators to unlock it. A little joke flits in before sleep takes you fully. Imagine ancient Egyptian teenagers being scolded for their messy, demotic handwriting. You'll never get a good temple job if you keep writing like that. Some things never change. Your eyes close, the demotic band blurring. You realize this script, once dismissed as the middle child, is actually the beating heart of the stone, the language of breath, chatter, laughter, and trade, captured in basalt. Without it, the decree would feel incomplete, too lofty, or too official. With it, the stone speaks not just to kings and priests, but to the people, to you. Your eyes drift upward again, to that top band of writing where the symbols stand like tiny gods frozen mid-gesture. This is the portion everyone thinks of when they hear the words Rosetta Stone. The hieroglyphs, the proud, enigmatic script that once lined the walls of temples and tombs like constellations scattered across sandstone. Owls blink, falcons spread wings, snakes coil, suns blaze, and reeds sway. All in lines so orderly you almost hear the rustle of papyrus. An obvious truth: hieroglyphs were never designed to be casual. They weren't scribbled notes or throwaway doodles. They were sacred art, carved to impress not only human eyes but the eyes of the gods. Each symbol was a little shrine, a prayer, a fragment of magic caught in stone. Unlike the more fluid, demotic, hieroglyphs demand posture. You feel yourself sitting straighter just staring at them, as if a falcon would swoop down and scold you for slouching. And here's the quirky part. To outsiders for centuries, hieroglyphs looked like pure decoration. Greeks and Romans marveled at them, but often assumed they were mystical emblems, never sounds. Some Renaissance scholars believed each hieroglyph carried a profound philosophical truth, like the bird wasn't owl, but divine wisdom hidden in feathers. Historians still argue whether even Egyptians themselves always thought of them that way, or if the priests enjoyed letting foreigners assume the glyphs were supernatural riddles. Either way, the mystique stuck. For nearly 2 millennia, no one could read them. They were locked stars, twinkling on stone walls, but out of reach. You lean close to the Rosetta Stone and trace your eyes along the rows. They march right to left, neat, precise, images so detailed you half expect them to flutter off the basalt. The falcon is Horus, the divine king. The seated figure might be a god or a determinative, silently clarifying what word you just read. Hieroglyphs weren't just letters. They could be sounds, symbols, or classifiers, sometimes all at once. It's like juggling emojis, phonetics, and footnotes in the same text message. You chuckle imagining a modern friend writing, "I eyes you at pizza place, restaurant, not divine offering." Another obvious truth: hieroglyphs were slow, painfully slow. You don't whip up 1,400 characters overnight. Writing a decree like this required an army of trained scribes, each drilled in the thousands of symbols. It was elite work, guarded knowledge. Ordinary Egyptians never wrote in hieroglyphs, just as most of us will never casually code in binary. That exclusivity made the script feel cosmic, as if only a chosen few could speak the universe's secret language. A fringe tidbit sneaks in. Some alternative theorists suggest hieroglyphs weren't simply writing, but a kind of multidimensional code, each symbol carrying layers of meaning, some phonetic, some pictorial, some astronomical. They argue the falcon doesn't just mean Horus or the sound, R, but also the constellation Aquila, or even a marker of a solstice rising. Mainstream scholars don't buy that, but you can't help noticing how many hieroglyphs mirror nature, sky, and star. It's tempting to see them as dual purpose, practical language and cosmic shorthand. The hammering of chisels echoes in your imagination again. The artisans must have taken special care on this top band, chiseling slowly, reverently. This wasn't just the king's decree. This was the god's decree channeled through human hands. The figures are deeper, sharper, more deliberate than the other bands. If the demotic was a hum and the Greek a whisper, the hieroglyphs were a trumpet blast. Historians still argue over how ordinary Egyptians perceived hieroglyphs. Were they awed by them, believing the symbols themselves carried magical power? Or did they shrug, seeing them as temple wallpaper, pretty but distant? The truth is probably both. Humans always mix reverence with indifference. Just as today some bow before religious texts while others skim them for trivia night answers. You tilt your head and let the glyphs blur. Suddenly they don't look like birds and snakes anymore, but like star charts. The falcon could be Orion. The snake, a winding Milky Way. The suns, obvious enough, solar cycles locked into stone. You can almost convince yourself the top band of the Rosetta Stone is not a decree at all, but a cosmic alignment manual. Maybe the priest smiled knowingly when carving it. Let the Greeks think it's politics, but we know it's the universe in shorthand. Another obvious truth surfaces. Humans always dream bigger than necessity. Even if the decree was just taxes and honors, the choice to record it in hieroglyphs makes it feel eternal, larger than life. It's as if the priests wanted to guarantee not only obedience, but also cosmic approval. After all, when your king is only 13 years old and his empire shaky, you might as well call on the stars for backup. You smirk as a little joke sneaks in. Imagine if modern governments tried the same approach. Presidential decrees written in emojis, calligraphy, and then plain English, carved into a granite billboard on the White House lawn. Tourists would flock, Instagram feeds would buzz, and maybe, just maybe, aliens passing by would nod in recognition. The desert night outside the museum glass deepens. You feel the hieroglyphs vibrating, not with literal sound, but with weight. They are more than symbols. They're anchors tying Earth to cosmos, politics to eternity. You press your palm gently to the glass, imagining the grooves beneath, and whisper to yourself, the gods are still listening. Your thoughts drift now toward a thin, determined figure hunched over parchment 2 millennia after the stone was carved. Jean-François Champollion. The name itself sounds like a challenge in pronunciation, much like the hieroglyphs he cracked. If the Rosetta Stone was the locked chest, Champollion was the one who picked it open with trembling hands and furious intellect. You see him in a cramped French study in the early 1800s, candles guttering, ink stains on his cuffs, muttering sounds to himself like a man half-possessed. An obvious truth: decoding a dead language is not glamorous. It's not a single eureka moment where a light bulb flicks on. It's years of headaches, false starts, piles of notes, and the haunting fear that you might be chasing a mirage. For centuries, scholars had prodded at hieroglyphs and failed. Some thought they were symbolic, some thought they were alphabetic, and many gave up altogether. But Champollion refused to let go. Quirky tidbit. As a child, he was already obsessed with Coptic, the last linguistic descendant of ancient Egyptians still used in Christian liturgy. By age 11, he declared he would one day decipher the hieroglyphs. That's like a middle schooler saying, "One day I'll read the stars." Everyone nodded politely, probably assuming he'd move on. He didn't. Historians still argue whether his breakthrough was inevitable, that someone else would have cracked the code eventually, or whether his unique stubbornness made the difference. What's certain is that Champollion pieced together the puzzle by comparing the Greek section of the stone to the hieroglyphs above it, and by using Coptic as a bridge. He realized some hieroglyphs weren't abstract symbols at all, but phonetic signs, letters, sounds, syllables. This was the leap no one before him had fully dared. Imagine his moment of recognition, hunched over his papers, cross-referencing names like Ptolemaeus and Cleopatra between the scripts, suddenly realizing the bird, the lion, the circle weren't just art, they were sounds. The stone was singing again, after being silent for more than 1,000 years. You almost hear him gasp, his quill dropping, his pulse racing. Another obvious truth. Even geniuses nearly collapse under their own brilliance. When Champollion announced his breakthrough in 1822, his body nearly gave out. Overwork, stress, and illness plagued him. He fainted dramatically during his presentation, as though the hieroglyphs themselves had drained his life to return their voice. You picture him collapsing in slow motion, scholars gasping, and a cosmic joke whispering. He unlocked the language of eternity, but forgot to take a nap. You lean back, sighing. Without Champollion, the Rosetta Stone would still be a mute monument, admired but not understood. His leap turned it into a key, unlocking tomb walls, temple hymns, and the flood of Egyptian history. Suddenly, gods, kings, and ordinary scribes spoke again, their words alive after millennia of silence. And yet, the fringe theories creep in. Some claim Champollion didn't unlock everything, that hieroglyphs still contain layers modern linguists overlook. They argue that while he revealed the phonetics, the mystical symbolic level remains untouched, waiting for a new decoder to see the cosmos in the falcon's wings and the snake's curves. Whether you agree or not, you can't help but smile at the thought. Champollion opened the door, but maybe the room has more chambers still hidden. Historians still argue, too, about how much of his work leaned on rivals, how much credit he alone deserves, and whether his interpretations have stood the test of time. Scholarship is never a tidy victory. It's always a tug-of-war between egos and evidence. But in the public imagination, he remains the man who made the stone speak. Another joke sneaks in. Imagine Champollion today, seeing his name used for trivia questions and museum labels. He'd probably glare, muttering, "I gave the world back Egypt, and you put me on a flashcard?" You close your eyes, feeling the warmth of candlelight, the rasp of a quill scratching across parchment, the frantic heartbeat of discovery. Champollion's voice drifts to you across centuries, excited, breathless, almost childlike. He is proof of another obvious truth. Obsession moves mountains, or, in this case, unlocks stones. The Rosetta Stone glows faintly in your imagination, not just as a carved slab, but as a bridge between eras, between one determined Frenchman and a civilization that thought its words would last forever. And maybe they did, because you're here, whispering them in your mind, listening to a chorus that Champollion coaxed back into existence. You let Champollion fade back into the shadows of his study, and your gaze returns to the carved birds, snakes, and suns on the stone. A thought strikes you like a comet. What if these hieroglyphs aren't just sounds and words, but cosmic puns? Symbols that carry double meanings, one for the ears of men and another for the eyes of the stars. An obvious truth. Ancient Egyptians loved wordplay. Their language was riddled with homophones, and scribes were notorious for slipping in puns that mixed literal and symbolic meanings. A falcon could be Horus the god, or the syllable R, or even a stand-in for sky. A circle with a dot could mean Ra, the sun god, or simply the sun itself, or just the letter R. It's as if every word carried a second job description, like the universe moonlighting as a comedian. Quirky tidbit. Egyptian priests sometimes composed hymns where the same hieroglyph could be read 3 different ways at once, making verses both poetry and puzzle. Imagine karaoke night, where the lyrics depend on how clever you are at decoding. You grin because it means the Rosetta Stone may have been less like a boring tax decree and more like a layered cosmic crossword. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians consciously intended such puns to hold cosmic significance, or if it was just linguistic flexibility. But when you stare at the stone, you can't help sensing that double pulse. One message for politics, one for eternity. Take the cobra glyph, often linked to royalty. On the stone, it affirms Ptolemy's authority, sure, but it also curls like a serpent constellation slithering through the Milky Way. Was that coincidence, or a wink from the priests who carved it? Another obvious truth. Egyptians tied nearly everything back to the cosmos. Their calendar, their rituals, even their architecture leaned on alignments with stars. Why wouldn't their writing do the same? You run your eyes across the glyph of a lion. To the Greeks reading the bottom band, it meant nothing. To Egyptians, it was strength, ferocity, rulership. But to an astronomer priest squinting at the horizon, it was Leo, the lion constellation crouching over the summer solstice. The pun becomes cosmic. Lion as beast, lion as symbol of king, lion as guardian of the heavens. A fringe tidbit slips into your drowsy mind. Some modern theorists suggest hieroglyphs were designed as dual-purpose language, phonetic for humans, but simultaneously astronomical markers, like secret star maps etched into every temple wall. They point to repeated patterns of birds and stars that line up uncannily with constellations. Whether mainstream scholars scoff or not, the idea glows with possibility. Maybe the Rosetta Stone wasn't just repeating words, it was repeating the cosmos. Another obvious truth nudges you. Humor has always been a survival tool. Egyptians lived with floods, droughts, and fickle pharaohs. A little wordplay kept things bearable. Maybe a priest smirked while carving the decree. Chuckling at the double meanings, he slipped past the king's officials. Picture it. An artisan tapping the cobra glyph into basalt, whispering to his apprentice, "This one means taxes and stars. Don't tell anyone." And here's your light joke of the night. If hieroglyphs were cosmic puns, then the Rosetta Stone is basically the universe's dad joke carved in granite. You just need 2,000 years and a Frenchman with ink stains to finally get the punchline. You tilt your head back, letting your eyes blur. The hieroglyphs glow faintly in your imagination, shimmering like constellations. They are not fixed definitions, but shimmering possibilities, changing depending on how you read them. It's not unlike modern memes, a single picture carrying endless layered meanings, understood differently by each generation. The falcon is both bird and god, symbol and syllable, mortal and cosmic. Historians still argue how much of this was intentional, but your sleepy brain doesn't care. The Egyptians were masters of blending the sacred and the practical, the mundane and the cosmic. The Rosetta Stone is proof of it. It's a royal decree, yes, but it's also a cosmic pun, a layered joke, a wink across the centuries. You close your eyes and hear laughter, not mocking, but cosmic chuckles, the kind of soft amusement that comes from stars watching humans try to decode their language. Maybe that's the real message. The universe is playful, always hiding meaning in plain sight, waiting for you to squint at a falcon and realize it's also the sky. Your gaze drifts upward toward the sky, and for a moment the stone itself seems to blur into the constellations. Each line of hieroglyphs transforms in your imagination into stars stretched across the night. You start lining them up instinctively, like a child connecting dots in a puzzle book. The falcon matches a bright star in Orion's belt. The circle glyph seems to mimic Sirius, and the snake slithers perfectly into the curve of the Milky Way. You chuckle softly. Obvious truth. Humans will always find patterns, even when they might not be there. But sometimes those patterns are too perfect to dismiss. Think of ancient Egypt itself. Temples aligned with solstice sunrises, pyramids angled toward Orion, sacred calendars tied to Sirius. The cosmos wasn't decoration for them. It was the heartbeat of ritual life. Quirky tidbit. Every year, when Sirius reappeared at dawn after being hidden for 70 days, Egyptians celebrated the flooding of the Nile. That star wasn't just a point of light. It was the herald of survival. And here, on the Rosetta Stone, you can't help but feel the same celestial pulse in its carvings. Historians still argue whether the stone deliberately encoded constellations or if it's just our pattern-loving brains projecting. Yet as you tilt your head, the arrangement of birds and suns seems too tidy, as though the priests were quietly charting the sky while pretending to praise the king. Maybe the decree was less about taxes and more about time itself, disguised for those who couldn't read the stars. You press your palm flat against the glass, tracing a path across the band of hieroglyphs, pretending it's a star map. Orion strides across your skin. Sirius glints at your fingertips. The Milky Way winds along your palm. For a moment, the museum melts away, and you're lying on your back in 196 BC, the desert wind cool against your cheeks, the priests chanting nearby, while constellations spill across the heavens. Another obvious truth. Language is never just about words. It's also about orientation, where you are, how you stand, what direction you face. To Egyptians, the cosmos was a text too, one that had to be read nightly. The Rosetta Stone might simply be one page of that larger cosmic book. You grin as a little joke sneaks in, Imagine a priest leaning over the half-carved stone and muttering, "Yes, it says the king is merciful, but if you stand at just the right angle, it also tells you when Sirius will rise." 2 for 1. The fringe tidbit grows stronger in your mind. Some fringe theorists claim the stone is a fragment of a much larger cosmic manual, a set of slabs mapping the heavens, of which only one survived. They argue that its triple repetition mirrors the way the cosmos repeats itself, stars, planets, and cycles playing in triplicate. Skeptical scholars roll their eyes, but you admit the thought is enticing. Maybe somewhere under Nile mud lies a sister stone, its carvings pointing not to politics, but to eclipses, solstices, or even planetary conjunctions. Historians still argue about the placement of temples at Karnak and Luxor, whether their alignments were strictly ceremonial or deeply astronomical. The same debate clings to the Rosetta Stone. Was it simply bureaucratic, or was it an earthly mirror of the sky? You're not sure. But as the night deepens in your imagination, you see the stone glowing faintly like a miniature Orion nebula, proof that the cosmos might always have been hiding in plain sight. Another obvious truth anchors you. Even if the priest didn't intend it, humans like you will always connect Earth to sky. It's how we stay sane, grounding ourselves in patterns above when things below grow chaotic. And wasn't that what Ptolemy V needed? A sky-backed decree to steady a shaky throne? Your eyelids dip, heavy, while stars twinkle above the basalt in your imagination. The falcon tilts its head, the snake coils tighter, and you can almost hear the sky whisper, "Read us as you would words." We've always been speaking. And with that, the Rosetta Stone no longer feels like a slab. It feels like a telescope turned inside out, pulling the heavens into stone instead of sending your gaze upward. The thought won't leave you alone. Maybe this royal decree was never just a decree. You picture the priests gathering in Memphis in 196 BC, the smell of incense curling into air already thick with dust and politics. They sit cross-legged, papyrus rolls unfurled, and as they compose their praise for young Ptolemy V, their eyes drift upward to the sky. Why not lace the text with a second layer of meaning, one that mirrors the planetary alignments above Egypt? An obvious truth. Ancient people rarely separated heaven from earth. What happened in the sky was reflected in the lives of kings, floods, and harvests. A planetary conjunction wasn't a curiosity, it was a command. So, when the priests carved Ptolemy's virtues into stone, maybe they also froze the heavens of his reign, ensuring the king's legitimacy wasn't only political but cosmic. Quirky tidbit. Egyptian star charts sometimes described planets as the stars that know no rest, wandering across the sky while the fixed stars stayed loyal. Imagine the stone's falcons and lions not just as letters, but as shorthand for Mars striding across the firmament, Venus shimmering at dawn, Jupiter presiding like a regal judge. The decree praising the king may also be a sly nod to his celestial counterparts above. Historians still argue whether the Rosetta Decree aligns with specific astronomical events. Some claim the repeated symbols of suns and serpents correspond to planetary positions around 196 BC, perhaps even a rare alignment over Memphis. Others insist it's pure chance, that no priest snuck astronomy into a tax decree. But you know how Egyptians thought. Nothing was chance. Every rising, every setting, every shadow cast by an obelisk carried weight. You step closer, tracing the chipped edge where a piece of hieroglyphic text is missing. What if that missing portion once recorded a planetary omen, something so sensitive that later generations preferred it vanish? The stone's wound suddenly feels like a pause, a silence where a cosmic secret once glowed. Another obvious truth. Rulers love to be compared to planets. Even today, politicians get described as stars rising or meteors falling. To Egyptians, the parallel was stronger. The pharaoh wasn't just like a planet. He was a planet, wandering the human world as the gods wandered the heavens. So when the Rosetta Stone calls Ptolemy merciful, generous, divine, perhaps the priests were also mapping him onto Jupiter, the planet of kingship, or Ra, the sun itself. You chuckle at a small joke. Imagine being a priest told to draft this decree. Okay, make sure you say he cut taxes, praise his piety, and oh, don't forget to align him with Venus while you're at it. It's like writing a Yelp review that doubles as a horoscope. The fringe tidbit pushes deeper. Some esoteric interpreters argue the entire stone functions like an astronomical almanac. They see cycles embedded in the repetition of phrases, lunar counts hidden in the number of symbols, even star maps disguised as decorative flourishes. Whether or not that's true, the stone does echo with rhythm. 3 bands repeating, words circling back, phrases stacked like orbits. Historians still argue whether this rhythm is simply bureaucratic habit or intentional echo of cosmic cycles. But as your eyelids grow heavy, the stone pulses like a clock, tick-tock in granite, the universe's heartbeat captured in carved lines. You tilt your head back and see the night sky above Egypt. Planets gleam against the velvet dark, Mars red and insistent, Venus glimmering with steady allure, Saturn creeping at its deliberate pace. You realize that in 196 BC, priests must have stood in these same sands, watching these same lights, then walking into their workshops to carve the decree. Earth's stone mirrored heaven's stone, as above, so below. Another obvious truth, we still do the same. We name spacecraft after gods. We map our calendars to planetary motions. We check horoscopes as casually as Egyptians checked the Nile. The stone's decree may be ancient, but the impulse behind it, tying human life to cosmic order, still hums in you. You press your palm flat against the imagined basalt and whisper to yourself, this isn't only the king's law. It's the law of the stars, etched in triplicate, waiting for anyone patient enough to read. You hear the echo of footsteps as you wander through the ruins of Egypt's great sanctuaries, Karnak, Luxor, Dendera. Long colonnades stretch like stone forests, their pillars painted once in brilliant reds and blues, now faded into sleepy dusk colors. You tilt your head, noticing how the light still slides perfectly along their axes at sunrise or sunset, during solstices and equinoxes. The temples were not just houses for gods. They were observatories, devices for catching the sky. And with that thought, the Rosetta Stone starts to feel less like a lone decree and more like one page from a larger architectural manuscript. An obvious truth, Egyptian temples weren't built at random. They were oriented with precision, tied to solar risings, star points, and seasonal markers. Priests designed them as cosmic engines, where a beam of light could transform a dark chamber into a glowing shrine on one special day of the year. The architecture itself was a translation of the heavens. Quirky tidbit, at Abu Simbel, twice a year, the rising sun travels all the way into the temple's sanctuary, illuminating statues of gods, and intentionally missing Ta, the deity of darkness. That means they not only lined things up to include the right gods, but also excluded the wrong one. It's like cosmic stage lighting, only using the entire sun. So when you stand before the Rosetta Stone, you can't help but wonder, what temple once housed this slab? Was it tucked against a wall in a courtyard, where rays of sunlight would crawl across its inscriptions on certain days? Imagine the priests processing past, incense smoke curling upward, the decree gleaming as both political document and cosmic marker. Historians still argue about the original placement of the stone. Was it displayed at a temple in Sais, Memphis, or Rosetta itself? The text mentions the decree was to be erected in multiple temples, so there may have been several copies, sisters scattered across Egypt, all lined up with their own sacred sightlines. The surviving slab in London may just be the luckiest survivor of a family of cosmic inscriptions. Another obvious truth, you can't separate Egyptian writing from Egyptian space. Hieroglyphs on the Rosetta Stone might feel flat now, under museum lighting, but originally they were meant to live in sun and shadow, in alignment with star and season. Their meaning was amplified by their stage, just as a constellation has meaning only when seen against the night sky. A little joke slips into your imagination. Picture a temple architect explaining the plan. We'll align this corridor so the solstice sun hits the statue of Ra exactly at dawn. And his apprentice replies, why not just use curtains? The architect frowns. Because we're not building an IKEA living room. We're building eternity. The fringe tidbit stirs. Some suggest the Rosetta Stone's decree itself could have been timed to celestial events. They point to references in the text about the king's coronation and divine festivals, which may coincide with planetary alignments or solar cycles. In that view, The stone isn't only describing politics. It's freezing the heavens of 196 BC into stone, a cosmic timestamp hidden inside bureaucratic praise. You walk down an imaginary colonnade, your sandals clicking against stone, the hieroglyphs glowing like faint constellations along the wall. The pillars rise like frozen beams of starlight. In your ears, the chants of priests mingle with the hammering of stonecutters until temple and sky, decree and cosmos, all blur together. Historians still argue whether these alignments were strictly astronomical or symbolic. Was the goal accuracy, or was it ritual theater? Maybe it doesn't matter. To the Egyptians, astronomy and symbolism were one. The Rosetta Stone, with its 3 scripts, becomes another kind of temple, a linguistic colonnade where hieroglyphs, Demotic, and Greek stand like columns holding up the roof of meaning. Another obvious truth. Humans build monuments not only to mark power, but to synchronize themselves with something bigger. Temples point at stars, stones carry decrees, languages stack in triplicate. All are ways of saying, we belong to the cosmos. As your eyelids droop, you imagine lying inside one of those great temples on a festival morning, the shafts of light cutting through dust and incense, illuminating the decree. The Rosetta Stone gleams for a moment, not as a slab in a museum, but as a living star chart embedded in a sanctuary. The night air grows cooler. You whisper to yourself that maybe the stone was never meant to be understood as text alone. It was always part of architecture, part of ritual, part of the sky translated into granite. A temple echo that still hums if you know how to listen. You let the temples fade behind your eyes and return to the thought of the people who carved the stone, the cosmic scribes, men who saw themselves not just as clerks for a king, but as translators of starlight into stone. You imagine them at work, reed pens scratching on papyrus by torchlight, comparing drafts, muttering about phrasing, and then handing their words to the stonecutters who hammered eternity into basalt. An obvious truth. Scribes in ancient Egypt were more than literate workers. They were mediators between human speech and divine order. Writing itself was seen as a sacred act. The god Thoth, with his ibis head and calculating gaze, presided over every scroll, every tally, every decree. To write was to weave magic, to pin the intangible down into lines that could survive fire, flood, and time. Quirky tidbit. Egyptian scribes sometimes called themselves servants of the divine word. Their training wasn't just language. It included astronomy, ritual, and mathematics. Some scribes doubled as star watchers, marking the heliacal rising of Sirius or plotting lunar cycles to keep the calendar aligned. So, when you stare at the Rosetta Stone, maybe you aren't only looking at a political decree. You're looking at a cosmic record made by men who considered themselves custodians of both language and sky. Historians still argue how much of this cosmic thinking infused everyday decrees. Was a tax exemption just a tax exemption, or was it also a way of balancing cosmic scales, ensuring the temples remained aligned with heaven's rhythm? To us, bureaucracy feels soulless. To them, even bureaucracy hummed with starlight. You let your eyes blur across the stone's hieroglyphs and see the ibis of Thoth shimmering faintly, as though the god himself supervised the chiseling. Perhaps the scribes felt his presence, nodding approvingly whenever they tucked a solar symbol or serpent curve into the text. They may have believed they were not merely recording a king's words, but echoing divine speech that had already been written in the stars. Another obvious truth. Every culture imagines its intellectuals as something grander than note-takers. Today we call them scientists, philosophers, or influencers. In ancient Egypt, scribes were starlight translators. The Rosetta Stone is their business card, handed not only to priests and Greeks, but to the cosmos itself. You grin as a little joke arrives. Imagine a scribe muttering, "Great, another decree. Can't we just send a papyrus memo?" And his colleague replies, "Papyrus rots. Stars and stone don't." There's your job security. The fringe tidbit flickers through your mind. Some esoteric thinkers insist scribes intentionally embedded star codes into hieroglyphs, layering hidden astronomical data under the surface of political decrees. They see the falcon glyphs not just as phonetics, but as constellations mapped for initiates. Whether that's fanciful or not, the idea feels fitting. Cosmic scribes writing double texts, one for humans and one for the stars. Historians still argue whether Champollion's phonetic breakthrough captured the whole truth of hieroglyphs. Maybe scribes truly did mean for their symbols to resonate on multiple levels: sound, sense, and star. You can almost hear one chuckling from the afterlife. You cracked our alphabet, but did you crack our astronomy? Another obvious truth surfaces. Writing is never neutral. It always carries agendas, dreams, and metaphors, whether you're texting a friend or chiseling into basalt. The Rosetta Stone may seem like a dry decree, but the men who carved it probably believed they were tuning Egypt to the cosmos. Your eyelids droop as you imagine those scribes gazing upward between tasks. They tilt their heads, tracing constellations with ink-stained fingers, then glance back at the stone, copying the stars onto its face in the shape of falcons, lions, and circles. They are the cosmic stenographers of history, leaving you a document that still hums with their devotion. The desert night presses cool against your imagination. You hear chisels tapping like faint heartbeats, priests chanting nearby, and scribes whispering translations between human and divine. In that rhythm, the Rosetta Stone is no longer a decree at all, but a telescope in reverse. Not humans looking out at stars, but stars writing themselves down in stone through human hands. You blink and lean closer to the stone, trying to focus on what the decree actually says. It's easy to lose yourself in cosmic speculation, to chase falcons into constellations and lions into the zodiac, but there's something grounding in the actual words carved into this basalt canvas. You squint at translations. The Decree of Memphis, issued in 196 BC by priests in honor of young Ptolemy V. An obvious truth: it's not a grand poem about the stars. It's politics. The text praises the king for his generosity, his mercy, his devotion to the gods, and, most importantly, his decision to exempt temples from certain taxes. You almost laugh, because after all that cosmic grandeur, the stone's message boils down to: Ptolemy's awesome, the priests are exempt, long live the deal. Bureaucracy, eternal as Orion. Quirky tidbit: the decree describes how statues of the king were to be set up in temples, dressed in fine robes, and honored alongside gods during festivals. In other words, priests gave themselves cosmic clout by making sure the boy king's face was everywhere, like ancient propaganda posters plastered across Egypt. You imagine Ptolemy's slightly awkward teenage portrait smiling from every courtyard, looking less like a ruler and more like a kid forced to wear the same school photo outfit forever. Historians still argue how sincere these praises were. Did the priests truly see Ptolemy as divine, or were they just buttering up the crown to secure privileges? Either way, the stone proves a truth that hasn't changed: flattery works. A ruler might ignore your prayers, but praise him in 3 scripts, and suddenly your temple tax bill vanishes. And yet, something about the phrasing feels odd. The decree doesn't just talk about favors for priests. It also references cosmic order, divine approval, harmony between heaven and earth. The words are formulaic, yes, but formulaic in the way mantras are, repeated until they summon reality. You wonder if the priests themselves believed they were binding cosmic forces to earthly politics. Another obvious truth: no culture ever wrote just for humans. Sacred inscriptions were always also for the gods, who were expected to read, hear, or simply resonate with the words. When the decree praised Ptolemy, maybe it wasn't aimed at ears at all, but at starlight. A little joke sneaks in. Imagine if modern governments issued decrees in the same style. The mayor is wise, benevolent, and eternally radiant. Also, trash collection will now occur on Tuesdays. You'd roll your eyes, but you'd also remember it. The fringe tidbit glimmers in your imagination. Some esoteric interpreters argue the Rosetta Decree is layered: politics on the surface, astronomy beneath. The repeated praise of the king's eternal reign, they say, echoes planetary cycles, Jupiter's orbit, Saturn's return. Was the eternity of Ptolemy's rule a coded way of marking cosmic time? It sounds fanciful, but you admit the repetition has a hypnotic, almost astronomical rhythm. Historians still argue whether there's anything more in the text than standard priestly bureaucracy, but you can't shake the thought that language often slips beyond intention. Even if the priests only meant taxes, the words still pulse with cosmic metaphors, because that was the only way they knew how to write. You tilt your head and reread the translations. Temples exempt, statues dressed, festivals aligned. Boring on the surface, maybe, but in their structure you hear echoes of cycles, rituals tied to solstices and star risings. Perhaps the decree wasn't cosmic by design, but cosmic by accident, because in Egypt, nothing could be written without brushing against the stars. Another obvious truth: meaning multiplies when carved in stone. A decree written in papyrus might vanish as tax paperwork, but carved in basalt, it becomes eternal, a mirror where people, and dreamers like you, can find cosmic reflections whether or not they were intended. Your eyelids sag, and the decree itself begins to hum. The words blur together into chants, syllables becoming stars, praise becoming orbits. You realize you're no longer reading a royal decree, but hearing a lullaby of eternity, disguised as politics. You smile in the dimness. Maybe the stone was never just about priests and taxes. Maybe every decree is also a secret prayer, every praise a star code. Maybe that's the joke the cosmos keeps telling us. Bureaucracy and the divine are the same, if you squint hard enough. Your gaze lingers on one particular figure etched into the stone script, a crouched lion, muscles coiled, paw extended as though frozen mid-stride. At first glance, it's just another hieroglyph, a pictogram used to shape a syllable, maybe to stand in for the word strength or power. But the longer you stare, the more it prowls into something larger. An obvious truth: Egyptians didn't draw animals by accident. Every feather, every paw, every coil of a snake was deliberate. A lion wasn't just lion. It was kingly ferocity, guardian of thresholds, a prowler who lived both in desert sands and in starry constellations. And here on the Rosetta Stone, the lion does double duty. It tells you a sound, it tells you a word, and maybe it also tells you to look up. Quirky tidbit: in temple art, lions were sometimes paired as guardians, flanking gateways, a symbol of horizons, the place where the sun sets and rises. They weren't just decoration, they were cosmic doormen. Imagine two celestial bouncers at the edge of night, arms crossed, saying, "Only the sun gets in." So when you spot a lion carved into the Rosetta Decree, you can't help but wonder if it's more than grammar. It's a cosmic password. Historians still argue whether hieroglyphs like the lion glyph were intended to carry such layered meaning in every usage. Was every carved lion a cosmic guardian, or only when placed in temples and tombs? On a decree about taxes and festivals, was it simply shorthand? The debate rages: pragmatic scribes versus mystical astronomer priests. The truth, as usual, may be both. Another obvious truth: constellations were Egypt's oldest calendar. The lion constellation, Leo, marked the summer solstice, the season of the Nile's rising. Imagine standing on the desert plain, watching the constellation climb the horizon, and knowing the floods and life were coming. On the Rosetta Stone, that carved lion suddenly echoes with the same promise: strength, renewal, life delivered on cosmic schedule. You let your eyes blur until the lion on the basalt merges with Leo in the heavens. Its paw seems to rest on the stone, its body stretching into stars. Perhaps the priests intended exactly this: a glyph that was both word and constellation, letter and star map, ruler and guardian. A little joke creeps in. Picture an Egyptian scribe being asked, "So what does this lion mean?" He shrugs. "Well, it's an L sound. It's the king's power. It's also Leo rising, and it keeps demons away. Take your pick." You laugh quietly, because humans are experts at multitasking meaning. The fringe tidbit flutters across your imagination. Some claim lions on decrees like this weren't just ornamental, but encoded astronomical markers. Points in the sky where priests tracked solstices, eclipses, even comets. They argue the lion on the Rosetta Stone corresponds precisely to Leo's heliacal rising in 196 BC, marking the new king's rule with cosmic approval. Mainstream scholars call it coincidence, but you admit, coincidences in Egypt always feel suspiciously intentional. Historians still argue whether these interpretations give too much credit to the priests. Were they truly that astronomically savvy, or do we project our own cosmic longings onto their symbols? Yet the fact remains: lions roared in their temples, prowled their myths, and gleamed in their skies. It would be stranger if the priests hadn't seen cosmic weight in a simple lion. Another obvious truth. Humans have always trusted animals as symbols more than numbers. You can forget a date, but a lion rising in the east will always stick. The Rosetta Stone's lion is one such reminder, an anchor between earth and sky. As your eyelids grow heavy, the lion crouches lower, its paw stretching toward you, not menacing but protective. It becomes a guardian of your sleep, a cosmic doorkeeper watching the stars flicker above. The Rosetta Stone hums softly, its grooves glowing faintly like constellations, and the lion whispers, "Strength is not only in kings. It's in cycles, in stars, in stone, and in you." You exhale slowly. Bureaucracy dissolves. Cosmic guardians remain. Your eyes slide away from the lion glyph, and now you notice something subtler. The numbers hidden in repetition. The Rosetta Stone doesn't list 1, 2, 3 in neat order the way we jot them down. But patterns emerge if you pay attention. Phrases repeated exactly 3 times across the 3 scripts. Motifs that recur like drumbeats. Symbols that echo lunar cycles. Suddenly, the decree feels less like a block of text and more like a metronome ticking out the rhythm of the heavens. An obvious truth. Ancient civilizations loved cycles. Egyptians, Babylonians, Mayans, everyone kept calendars not just to know when a plant crops, but to feel tethered to something bigger than the random churn of life. The Rosetta Stone, when you squint at it, is part of that pattern, repetition as reassurance, carving cosmic order into stubborn stone. Quirky tidbit. Egyptian scribes often counted time in decans, 36 star groups that rose every 10 days, slicing the year into chunks of cosmic bookkeeping. Imagine planning your chores by watching which star rose at dawn. Forget Monday through Sunday. Their week began when a star appeared, vanished, or slid into another position. So when you look at the repeated lines on the stone, you can't help but wonder if those repetitions mirrored the decans, hidden star math tucked into priestly praise. Historians still argue whether the Rosetta Decree encodes any real astronomical cycle. Most see it as just legal redundancy, repeating the same text 3 times in 3 scripts to ensure everyone understood. But your sleepy mind doesn't buy that it's only redundancy. Humans rarely repeat things without reason. We repeat for memory, rhythm, and ritual. We repeat to turn words into chants. You count the falcons along the top band. 7. The number clings to you. 7 planets known to antiquity, 7 days of the week, an inheritance we still carry, 7 tones of a scale. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the scribes smiled while slipping cosmic arithmetic into the decree. Another obvious truth. Numbers have always been humanity's quiet poetry. A little joke floats up. You imagine a priest saying, "We need to write this decree 3 times. The apprentice groans, "Why 3? The priest shrugs, "Because 2 feels insecure, and 4 is overkill. 3 just sounds cosmic." The fringe tidbit flutters into your thoughts. Some fringe scholars claim the Rosetta Stone acts like a star clock, with its repeated symbols encoding lunar months or eclipses. They map certain glyphs to moon phases, claiming the stone was secretly a calendar disguised as bureaucracy. Mainstream Egyptologists roll their eyes, but admit that Egyptian temples often hid astronomical data in decoration. So why not here? Historians still argue whether these repetitions served practical literacy or cosmic theater. But you feel the cadence when you read the decree aloud. The words fall like lunar cycles, round and returning, the way priests might have chanted them during festivals. Even the triple script format itself feels like a cycle, hieroglyphs for gods, demotic for people, Greek for rulers, circling back into unity. Another obvious truth. Numbers make humans feel safe. When you spot rhythm in chaos, you believe the universe has your back. The priests knew this. That's why they carved the decree with such symmetry, why repetitions hum like a drumbeat. It wasn't just politics, it was reassurance carved into basalt. Your eyelids grow heavy. The numbers glow in your imagination, falcons multiplying into lunar crescents, suns repeating like equinoxes, lions pacing in cycles. You see the stone as a cosmic abacus, counting time, measuring floods, whispering reassurance that the cosmos is stable, eternal, repeating. The grooves under your hand pulse with rhythm. 1, 2, 3. Stars rise. Stars fall. Stars rise again. The Rosetta Stone hums not as a static decree, but as a cosmic metronome, keeping time for a universe that never truly forgets its beat. You steady your breathing and try to answer the question that has been tiptoeing around your thoughts all night. Is the Rosetta Stone a straightforward, three-script press release, or a sly cosmic manual disguised as bureaucracy? Both answers nudge your shoulders here in the dim gallery. To your left, sensible voices insist it's exactly what it looks like, a decree about temple dues, royal favors, and festival protocols. To your right, a constellation of dreamers whispers that every falcon and curling snake is also a star, that the slab is a sky in miniature, waiting to be read with the right kind of eyes. You pause between them, feeling the hush thicken like velvet. An obvious truth. History often lives where boredom and wonder touch. A tax exemption keeps bread in a priest's pantry. Enough bread keeps rituals funded. Rituals synchronize with calendars. Calendars track the sky. The sky steadies a civilization. Trace the chain backward, and a boring line item becomes a bronze gear inside the clock of meaning. That's why the stone can look like paperwork at noon and like a planetarium at midnight without changing a single groove. Both readings breathe through the same cuts in basalt, alternating like a tide. Take the pragmatic case first. It's 196 BC. The country is jittery, the king is young, and the temple network is powerful. Priests gather in Memphis to codify gratitude and loyalty, to standardize honors, to make sure customs officers stop badgering sanctuaries about grain. They craft language that praises Ptolemy V, promises festivals, details exemptions. Then they copy the text in hieroglyphs for sanctity, in Demotic for local administration, and in Greek for the Ptolemaic bureaucracy. Triple-entry bookkeeping for loyalty. Read that way, the stone is brilliant governance. One decree, 3 audiences, fewer excuses. It's the ancient equivalent of posting the policy on every bulletin board and emailing it to the entire company. Now the starstruck reply. The same priests also watch Sirius pin itself to the dawn line, note equinox shadows sliding across thresholds, and count out the slow hoofbeats of Saturn in their calculations. In such a world, writing is never merely terrestrial. Glyphs carry the flavor of sky because life tastes that way. Lions roar on the page when Leo rules the season. Falcons steady the sentence when kingship needs sky backing. Solar disks repeat because festivals chase the sun. Even if the decree is about taxes, its language is drenched in orbits. The stone hums with sky noise while speaking of grain. Historians still argue whether that double intention was conscious design or simply the native perfume of an astronomically literate culture. One camp warns against romantic fog, the other warns against anachronistic skepticism. You sway between them, a metronome of doubt and delight, because the stone itself keeps the beat. Tick, temples, talk, constellations, tick, customs receipts, talk, Ra's bark. The rhythm suits precisely because it refuses to stop at one answer. Quirky tidbit. In its early London years, the stone sat bare, and visitors rubbed its letters for luck and learning so often that keepers complained the surface was losing its crispness. Picture 19th century hands trying to download comprehension by touch. A museum of fingertips convinced the grooves might print wisdom onto their skin like carbon paper. If this is only a procedural memo, it is the most fondled memo in history. Perhaps, then, a truce. Maybe the priests weren't smuggling a star atlas past censors. Maybe they simply couldn't write in any register that didn't smell of the sky. In a land where calendars were river-tuned and funerals were star-mapped, language picked up starlight the way linen picks up incense. Even a practical sentence came perfumed with cosmic association. Small joke to keep you honest. If you'd asked a scribe for just the bullet points, he might have handed you a papyrus covered in falcons and suns. Technically concise, spiritually extra. The fringe tidbit curls like smoke. Rumors of sister slabs still asleep under temple courtyards. Copies of the decree with tiny marginal pecks, star-like dots near festival lines. Perhaps local annotations matching exact dawn risings. No proof. Only field tales and a few suspiciously regular chips photographed in situ before blocks vanished into walls. Yet you enjoy the idea. Editions of the decree customized to their sky, the way printers today swap out city names on a poster. If one ever rises from mud with such marks intact, the argument will have a new moon to orbit. Historians still argue whether modern readers fall for apophenia, the noble human habit of seeing constellations everywhere. They caution, 3 birds in a row are just 3 birds unless context lights them. You nod, chastened, then promptly connect 3 more because your brain is made of night sky. Another joke drifts by. Stare long enough at your bathroom tiles, and you can chart a voyage to Atlantis. It's not the map that's missing, it's the boat. So you return to cadence. The decree repeats itself in triplicate, phrases recur like drum beats, and ceremonial diction settles over the stone like a rhythmic shawl. Even if this is conventional priestly prose, it functions like a tuning fork. Speak it aloud, and the room finds a key. Carve it, and the courtyard inherits a pulse. Documents that stabilize loyalties also stabilize time. Ritual does not ask which job you hired it for. It quietly performs both. Another light joke taps your shoulder. The text is basically the universe's HR email. Mandatory, slightly lofty, oddly comforting by the third reread. Another obvious truth relaxes across your shoulders. Sleep doesn't require a verdict. You don't have to choose a camp before you yawn. Let the stone remain a vase that is also 2 faces depending on how you blink. The bureaucrats can keep their ledger, the star watchers can keep their sextant, and you can keep the hush between them, where the grooves feel cool and meanings widen gently. Think of Champollion, ink on cuffs, phonetics unlocked, handing both sides a key. The practical side gets words, the poets get the sky. He would probably accept, in return, a long nap and a lamp with a dimmer switch. A last joke, soft as dust. A priest and an accountant walk into a bar. The priest orders wine. The accountant orders water. The bartender pours both from the same jar and calls it balance. You raise your drowsy cup to that. Promise not to settle the argument tonight, and let the stone be what stones are best at, quiet, heavy, and large enough to cradle 2 truths at once. Your mind drifts back to the brightest star of them all, Sirius. You picture yourself on the banks of the Nile, dawn paling the sky, priests craning their necks toward the horizon. For 70 days, Sirius had been hidden, swallowed by the sun's glare. And then, on one crucial morning, it returns. The moment the star peaks above the eastern horizon, the priests exhale in unison. Because for Egyptians, Sirius didn't just mean a twinkling point of light. It meant water, flood, life itself. An obvious truth. Civilizations live and die by their rivers. Without the annual Nile flood, there would be no Egypt, no papyrus, no temples, no Rosetta Stone. Sirius was the celestial alarm clock that announced salvation. Its reappearance marked the start of the new year, the moment when farmers knew the Nile would soon swell, bringing fertile silt. In effect, the star was a cosmic tax notice, but one that promised abundance rather than burden. Quirky tidbit. The Egyptians called Sirius Sopdet and often depicted it as a goddess with a 5-pointed star above her head, seated proudly with a water jar. Imagine seeing your star in the heavens every night and also on the lintel of your temple. She was both light in the sky and symbol in the stone. That duality feels uncannily like the Rosetta Stone itself, both earthly decree and heavenly echo. Historians still argue whether the Rosetta Decree makes any hidden reference to Sirius. Some fringe interpreters point out that the language about Ptolemy's eternal reign and renewal of festivals mirrors the cyclical rising of the star. Others scoff, insisting the priests were too busy cementing their tax exemptions to embed astronomy. But you can't help smiling at the thought. Even if unintentional, their words breathe with cosmic cycles simply because Egypt breathed with Sirius. Another obvious truth. When you stare at the Rosetta Stone long enough, the rows of glyphs resemble dawn horizons, lines across which stars rise. The falcons look like birds in flight at sunrise, the circles like glowing suns. It's easy to imagine the decree itself as a snapshot of Sirius rising, caught not in the sky, but in basalt. You lean back and imagine yourself beside the priests, their linen robes crisp, their voices chanting as they watch the stars return. They weren't just astronomers, they were translators of the sky, turning that dawn event into ritual, calendar, and decree. You almost hear the chant vibrate with the same rhythm as the stone's 3 scripts, each a different language saying, The king reigns, the river rises, the cosmos approves. A small joke tiptoes in. Picture a sleepy farmer nudging his neighbor at dawn, pointing at Sirius and grumbling. Great, now I've got to fix the irrigation ditches again. Not everyone greets cosmic renewal with reverence. The fringe tidbit sharpens. Some alternative theorists argue the very design of hieroglyphic repetition on the stone mimics the heliacal cycle of Sirius, vanishing, then returning, threefold like the scripts themselves. They claim the decree wasn't just about Ptolemy, but a ritual reenactment of Sirius' disappearance and rebirth. Mainstream scholars dismiss this as wishful thinking, yet you can't ignore how neatly the metaphor fits. Historians still argue whether Sirius' importance shaped political language. Was it coincidence that kings styled themselves as shining forever, echoing the star that returned without fail? Or was it deliberate? The truth lies buried in silence, but your mind lingers on the alignment. Star, flood, king, decree. Another obvious truth. Humans crave certainty. Stars provide it. Sirius rose each year, without fail, just when the Nile was needed. No wonder Egyptians married their politics to that rhythm, binding kingly legitimacy to celestial punctuality. The Rosetta Stone is part of that marriage, seemingly about priests and taxes, but humming with Sirius' heartbeat. Your eyelids sag as you imagine the horizon glowing, Sirius blinking awake, the Nile swelling like a giant lung inhaling life. The stone, heavy and silent, mirrors the same rhythm: disappearance, repetition, return. And somewhere in its grooves, the goddess Sopdet smiles, carrying her water jar not just across the heavens, but into your dreams. Your mind drifts from Sirius down to earth, to the figure of the king himself, Ptolemy V, the boy pharaoh. Barely a teenager when this decree was issued, his reign was fragile, hemmed in by revolts, foreign threats, and ambitious priests who knew their leverage. Yet the language carved into the stone is grand, almost planetary. You notice it. He isn't just praised as merciful or generous. He's described as eternal, radiant, a being whose reign echoes the cycles of the heavens. An obvious truth. Kings have always borrowed light from the sky. It's the oldest trick in politics. Claim the sun as your father, the moon as your crown, the planets as your servants, and suddenly your power feels less negotiable. If the stars themselves approve of you, who dares argue? Ptolemy V's scribes weren't just flattering him. They were painting him as a celestial body in flesh. Quirky tidbit. The Greeks who ruled Egypt after Alexander often styled themselves as pharaohs to fit local tradition, but they also imported Greek cosmic philosophy. Some Ptolemies were depicted on coins with solar rays shooting from their crowns, echoing both Ra and Apollo. A hybrid of cosmic marketing strategies, if you will. Imagine a royal PR department whispering, "Should we brand him as a planet or a sun? Let's do both. It plays better with the demographics." Historians still argue how sincerely Egyptians accepted these Ptolemaic rulers as divine. Did they truly believe Ptolemy V embodied Ra's eternal light, or did they just play along because the priest said so? The answer probably shifts depending on whether you asked a temple priest, a Greek administrator, or a farmer elbow-deep in mud. But the rhetoric carved in basalt leaves little doubt. The king was a celestial wanderer, a star disguised as a boy. You tilt your head and picture it. The decree praises him for bringing peace, for feeding the people, for honoring temples. But beneath those phrases, you hear the subtext. He is Venus rising at dawn, Jupiter enthroned in the night sky, Saturn's patient ruler of time. The stone doesn't say it outright, but the imagery pulses through its lines. The pharaoh is not merely on earth. He is the earth's reflection of the heavens. Another obvious truth. Humans can't resist personifying the cosmos. When we look up, we see ourselves, a hunter, a lion, a scorpion, a king. To Egyptians, the reverse was also true. When they looked at a king, they saw the stars. A light joke sneaks in. You imagine the teenage Ptolemy overhearing priests declare him a living planet and muttering, "Great, I can't even finish algebra, and now I'm Saturn?" Cosmic pressure for puberty. The fringe tidbit stirs. Some esoteric thinkers argue that pharaohs weren't just symbolically linked to planets. They were believed to be actual incarnations of celestial forces. Each king embodied a planet during his reign, and when he died, that planetary spirit returned to the heavens. If true, the Rosetta Decree isn't just praising a boy king. It's logging the descent of a star into human form. Historians still argue whether such cosmic incarnations were literal belief or metaphor. Was the pharaoh Jupiter itself, or was he merely Jupiter's representative? The ambiguity lingers, because Egyptian religion loved blurred lines. Gods could be planets, animals, abstract concepts, and kings, all at once, depending on the ritual. Another obvious truth: power always looks more stable when framed as eternal. Ptolemy's reign may have been fragile on Earth, but carved in stone, he becomes as enduring as the orbits overhead. The priests ensured his legitimacy not by detailing policies, but by aligning him with cosmic permanence. Your eyelids droop, and the boy king begins to shimmer in your imagination. His face morphs into a glowing orb, his crown into Saturn's rings, his eyes twin stars. He walks not through Memphis streets, but across the zodiac. Each step a season, each gesture a constellation. The Rosetta Stone, once a decree, now feels like his passport, proof that a planet once lived among humans. You exhale softly. The pharaoh is no longer just a ruler. He is Mars blazing, Jupiter reigning, Venus smiling. And in the grooves of basalt, he still wanders, eternal as the night sky. The more you study the grooves, the more the Rosetta Stone stops feeling like text and starts feeling like a mirror. It's not just reflecting a king's decree. It's reflecting the sky above and the people below. You lean closer, and the polished black granodiorite almost shines like water. Your own sleepy face hovers in the glass over the glyphs, mixing with falcons, lions, and suns, as though the stone is reminding you that reading it is as much about you as it is about Ptolemy. An obvious truth: humans love to project themselves onto things. We see rabbits in clouds, faces in sockets, destiny in spilled coffee. The Rosetta Stone invites projection because it's already layered: political, religious, linguistic. Why not add cosmic? Each band of script becomes a stratum of reflection: hieroglyphs as the divine sky, demotic as the living earth, Greek as the governing hand. Together, they form a complete cosmos. Quirky tidbit: early visitors to the British Museum often wrote in their diaries that the stone looked like a tablet of the heavens. They weren't Egyptologists. They didn't know the decree's mundane content, but the triple writing struck them as cosmological, almost planetary. To them, it wasn't a boring decree at all. It was a map. The irony? They were half wrong and half right at the same time. Historians still argue whether we over-romanticize artifacts like this. Should we stick to the known translation, tax breaks and festivals, or allow ourselves to read in metaphors? The cautious say stay in the lines. The dreamers say lines are mirrors too. You hover between them, hearing both voices like an argument between your inner accountant and your inner poet. Another obvious truth: mirrors don't just reflect. You also see what you want to see. When you stare at the stone, you catch your own longing for order, for connection to the cosmos. The priests may have only wanted tax exemptions, but you want a star chart. And maybe that's fine. Every age finds its own reflection. You let your eyes drift until the stone becomes a night sky in miniature. The chipped edge is a crescent moon. The lines of text are horizons. The glyphs sparkle like constellations caught in rock. You imagine the priests intended exactly this: a mirror of heaven, solid and unblinking. So even when clouds or sandstorms hid the stars, the cosmos remained available in stone. A little joke slips in. You picture a priest telling a villager, "Can't see the stars tonight? Don't worry, we carved them onto this rock. Please admire the king while you're at it." The fringe tidbit flickers. Some theorists claim the stone was deliberately polished to mimic the sheen of the night sky, its flecks of quartz twinkling under torchlight like a portable firmament. They argue it was less a document and more a cosmic mirror placed in temple courtyards, reflecting both worshippers and the heavens above. Whether or not that's true, the idea feels right in your bones as you trace your reflection over its glass case. Historians still argue whether the Rosetta Stone should be thought of primarily as writing or as object. Was it a book in basalt, or was it a mirror designed to radiate cosmic legitimacy? Maybe it was both. The priests knew the power of dualities: sun and moon, life and death, heaven and earth. Why wouldn't they craft a decree that doubled as reflection? Another obvious truth. Humans rarely separate function from symbol. Our coins carry mottos. Our flags hold stars. Our monuments double as calendars. The Rosetta Stone fits right into this habit, whether as a bureaucratic decree, a starry mirror, or both. Your eyelids sink lower. The black surface shimmers in your imagination, turning into a lake at night, constellations scattered across its ripples. You see your reflection floating among falcons and suns, your face merging with ancient carvings. For a moment, you feel like the stone is not only recording history, it's recording you, pulling your gaze, your breath, your wonder into its mirror. You sigh, the thought soothing. Perhaps the Rosetta Stone was never meant to be understood only one way. It was meant to reflect whoever looked at it, priest, soldier, scholar, or sleepy dreamer. Each sees themselves, their cosmos, their meaning. That's the stone's true magic. Not just what it says, but what it mirrors. The longer you linger before the stone, the more it feels less like a decree and more like grammar in motion. Not grammar of sentences, but grammar of the cosmos itself. Every falcon, every reed, every snake seems less like a letter and more like punctuation marks in a celestial syntax. You realize with a half-smile that you're no longer reading it as text. You're hearing it, as if it were a language the stars might use. An obvious truth. All languages have grammar, whether it's English commas, Latin cases, or emojis lined up into a makeshift sentence. Without structure, words are noise. Without order, stars are just dots. Egyptians knew this. Their hieroglyphs weren't random doodles. They obeyed a hidden structure, rules as strict as constellations sliding across the night sky. Quirky tidbit. Egyptian hieroglyphs often included determinatives, symbols at the end of words that clarified meaning. A squiggly line might mean river, but add a determinative of 3 water ripples, and suddenly you know it's the Nile, not just any stream. It's like cosmic footnotes. Picture texting your friend, "I'm at the bank, not the river waterway." Egyptians were doing that 3,000 years ago. Historians still argue whether hieroglyphs were designed with an astronomical logic in mind. Did scribes deliberately structure their writing to echo the cycles of stars? Or is that our modern projection? Some point to the way solar symbols punctuate sentences, or how certain bird glyphs mirror constellations. Others warn against stretching patterns too far. But you can't shake the feeling that these symbols weren't just phonetics. They were building blocks of a larger cosmic grammar. Another obvious truth. Grammar doesn't just describe, it creates. When you say, "the king reigns," you're not just reporting, you're reinforcing reality. The stone does the same. By carving Ptolemy as eternal, radiant, divine, it isn't just flattery, it's an act of creation, as binding as the orbit of planets. You let your gaze trace one line of hieroglyphs, imagining it not as words, but as a sentence of stars. The falcon is the subject, the sun disk the verb, the serpent the object. Together they form a phrase in a language not of Earth, but of the universe itself. Suddenly the decree feels less like politics and more like syntax shared between gods and men. A little joke nudges you. Imagine the cosmos texting humanity. Sun with face rules globe showing Europe Africa with eagled. Egyptians would nod in agreement. Moderns would screenshot it as meme. Different ages, same grammar. The fringe tidbit drifts in. Some esoteric readers believe the entire Rosetta Stone encodes a cosmic algorithm, a syntax of creation itself. They argue that by repeating the decree in 3 scripts, the priests mirrored a trinity, heaven, earth, and underworld. To them, each script wasn't just language. It was a layer of cosmic grammar, aligning all realms into one decree. Mainstream scholars dismiss this as mystical overreach, but the image sticks. A sentence written by 3 worlds at once. Historians still argue about whether Champollion's phonetic decipherment stripped the hieroglyphs of their symbolic grammar. Did he unlock the letters, but miss the syntax of the cosmos? Or did he free them from superstition, showing they were just words? The debate rumbles like thunder in scholarly halls. You lean toward both being true, letters for humans, grammar for the stars. Another obvious truth. When we structure meaning, we structure reality. Whether through language or ritual, through glyphs or orbits, we give chaos shape. The Rosetta Stone is more than a decree. It's a grammar book for existence, showing how heaven, king, and people align in syntax that binds them together. Your eyelids sag heavier now. The glyphs blur into starry punctuation, commas of suns, verbs of falcons, parentheses of snakes. You feel like you're reading not with your eyes, but with your heartbeat, each thud a syllable in the universe's sentence. You whisper drowsily, the cosmos speaks in grammar, and tonight, you're finally listening. Your thoughts wander to how language doesn't just describe the world, it also organizes it. On the Rosetta Stone, the decree isn't just flattering Ptolemy or freeing temples from taxes. It's building bridges. Each line stitches together a kingdom stretched thin, a patchwork of Greek rulers, Egyptian priests, and everyday people trying to survive another year of Nile floods. The text feels less like words and more like constellations, patterns drawn so scattered groups can recognize themselves as part of the same sky. An obvious truth: humans crave unifying symbols. Whether flags, myths, or shared stories, we look for something that gathers us into a we. In Ptolemy's Egypt, the Rosetta Stone served that role. 3 scripts, 1 message. A single decree, but phrased to reach gods in hieroglyphs, merchants in Demotic, and administrators in Greek. It's like broadcasting on 3 radio stations at once, making sure no one misses the song. Quirky tidbit: the decree ordered that identical stones be set up in every major temple. Imagine dozens of Rosetta Stones standing in courtyards across Egypt, each repeating the same praise. Walk from the Delta to Thebes, and you'd keep bumping into the same carved lines. It was propaganda, yes, but also ritual theater, the way repeated constellations appear no matter where you travel under the sky. Historians still argue whether these decrees truly unified the population or simply pacified them. Did farmers feel loyalty to a teenage king because his name glowed on temple walls? Or was this primarily about cementing priestly power? Either way, the effect was clear. The decree became a cosmic glue, binding politics, religion, and society into one shared narrative. Another obvious truth: constellations work the same way. There is no real lion in the sky, just stars scattered across light years. Humans connect them into Leo, and suddenly those dots are a symbol shared across cultures. In Egypt, the Rosetta Stone was Leo in basalt, arranging scattered people into a single pattern under the king's light. You imagine standing in a temple courtyard as priests read the decree aloud. Their voices echo through columns while villagers watch, nodding slowly. Maybe they don't fully grasp every word, but the rhythm alone feels binding. The Greek officials standing nearby nod for different reasons. The king's name crosses 3 languages at once, a spell of unity. A little joke tugs at you. Picture someone in 196 BC rolling their eyes. Another decree? Great. Does this one finally fix the price of beer? But even cynics can't escape the pull of a unifying symbol. The fringe tidbit floats in. Some theorists claim the priests deliberately mirrored the sky structure in the stone's trilingual format. Hieroglyphs as heaven, Demotic as earth, Greek as the mediating underworld. 3 registers, 1 cosmos. They argue the decree wasn't just political glue, but a cosmological model, tying Egypt's diverse peoples into the same universal order. Whether you buy it or not, you admit the symmetry is haunting. Historians still argue how consciously political these cosmic echoes were. Did the priests cleverly wrap their self-interest in celestial symbolism, or did they truly see governance as inseparable from cosmic order? Either way, the result is the same. The Rosetta Stone hums as both political decree and cosmic constellation. Another obvious truth: unity is fragile. Like constellations, it only holds if you keep drawing the lines. Stop telling the story, and the stars scatter back into random dots. The priests knew this, which is why they carved the decree in stone, copied it everywhere, and aligned it with heaven's rhythm. Unity had to be rehearsed, repeated, etched into memory like Orion rising again each year. Your eyelids droop as you picture Egypt blanketed with dozens of Rosetta Stones, all glowing faintly like stars scattered across the desert. From temple to temple, they repeat the same lines, creating a constellation of decrees across the land. A cosmic network, binding earth to sky, king to people, meaning to memory. You sigh softly. Maybe unity is always like that. Fragile, repeated, carved again and again until it feels eternal. You shuffle forward in your imagination, away from Egypt's temples and into candlelit salons of Paris in the early 1800s. The Rosetta Stone has crossed the Mediterranean now, seized as spoils of war, and suddenly French intellectuals are obsessed. The fragment of black basalt, cracked and scarred, becomes the most glamorous puzzle piece on the continent. You picture a group of scholars huddled around plaster casts of the stone, their spectacles fogging from excitement, the air thick with ink, tobacco, and feverish whispers. An obvious truth: obsession drives scholarship as much as curiosity. These French savants weren't simply curious, they were consumed. The stone became their midnight companion, their rival, their muse. They pored over its 3 scripts like gamblers studying a deck of cards, hoping one slip would reveal the trick. Quirky tidbit: some of these early scholars convinced themselves that hieroglyphs weren't language at all, but a mystical code of symbolic pictures. They argued a falcon wasn't a sound, or even a word, but the cosmic essence of divinity. Entire books were written decoding hieroglyphs as abstract philosophy. Beautiful guesses, but guesses that kept the language locked. Imagine pouring years into studying a script, only to be told later, "Oh, those birds and snakes? They're just syllables." You want to knock over your ink pot. Historians still argue whether this symbolic misstep delayed decipherment or enriched it. On one hand, it led scholars astray for centuries. On the other, it reminds us that meaning is always layered. Maybe the falcon was both sound and symbol, both phonetic and cosmic. The truth, as usual, resists tidy categories. You lean closer to the image of those Parisian nights, candles guttering, scholars scribbling late into the morning, eyes ringed with exhaustion. They were less like bureaucrats and more like stargazers, straining to hear whispers from the stone. Their wives and neighbors surely thought them mad. Yet they pressed on, night after night, searching for patterns in the grooves as if decoding not just language, but the universe itself. Another obvious truth: humans love puzzles. Crosswords, riddles, Rubik's Cubes. Our brains itch to find order. The Rosetta Stone was the ultimate crossword. Only the clues were carved by a civilization long gone. And the prize? Not a new high score, but the resurrection of an entire language. A little joke sneaks in. You imagine a Parisian scholar in 1810 muttering, "One more night, and I'll crack it," while his friend sighs, "That's what you said last month." Go to bed before the falcon glyph starts talking back. The fringe tidbit circles. Some esoteric dreamers in that era suggested the stone might not only reveal Egyptian language, but also an original cosmic tongue, a proto-language shared by gods and humans. They believed if you could peel back the scripts, you might uncover the very language of creation, a grammar written into stars and atoms. Mainstream scholars scoffed, but the idea buzzed like electricity. What if the Rosetta Stone wasn't just a translation key, but a ladder into the cosmos? Historians still argue how much nationalism fueled this obsession. France and Britain both claimed the stone like a trophy, each eager to prove their scholars were clever enough to unlock Egypt first. Scholarship became a battlefield, the grooves of the stone serving as trenches. Yet in that rivalry, language itself benefited. Every letter traced, every symbol debated, brought humanity one step closer to hearing ancient voices again. Another obvious truth: rivalry sharpens focus. Without the Franco-British competition, maybe Champollion wouldn't have raced so fiercely to crack the code. Perhaps the cosmos' new rivalry is just another tool for progress, like pressure that turns sand into stone. Your eyelids sink lower. You imagine those Paris nights stretching endlessly, scholars leaning on plaster casts, mumbling at falcons, tracing serpents until dawn. The stone glows in their minds like Sirius rising, pulling them further into obsession. For them, the Rosetta Stone wasn't a relic, it was a portal. And night after night, they pressed their ears against it, convinced it was murmuring the secrets of heaven. You drift deeper into the haze of candlelight, until one figure stands apart from the crowd: Jean-François Champollion, the young genius whose name now clings to the stone like ivy on a temple wall. He's restless, sharp-eyed, and almost frighteningly obsessed. You can picture him bent over his notes, hair wild, muttering to himself in French while hieroglyphs sprawl across the page. To him, the Rosetta Stone isn't just a puzzle, it's destiny. An obvious truth. Sometimes breakthroughs are born from obsession rather than balance. Champollion barely slept, often fainted, and famously collapsed when he finally cracked the code in 1822. His health burned out like a candle stub, yet the blaze lit up a lost civilization. Quirky tidbit. When he first declared victory, he reportedly shouted, "J'ai atteint le fer. I've got it," and then promptly passed out on the floor. Imagine being so committed to cracking a cosmic code that your body gives up the instant your brain crosses the finish line. It's like winning a marathon and then faceplanting at the ribbon. Historians still argue whether Champollion's breakthrough was inevitable or if he truly was singular. Others had hints, partial insights, even rival claims. But Champollion had one key advantage. He actually knew Coptic, the last surviving phase of the Egyptian tongue, still spoken in churches. It was like having a flashlight when everyone else stumbled in the dark. Was he a lone genius, or just the right nerd with the right tools at the right time? The debate hums on. Another obvious truth: language carries memory. The Coptic tongue, chanted by priests in dim cathedrals, carried echoes of pharaohs long gone. Champollion realized those echoes matched the hieroglyphs' whispers. In other words, the Rosetta Stone didn't just preserve Egypt's language, it tethered it across millennia, waiting for someone obsessed enough to listen. You picture Champollion sketching falcons and suns, pairing them with sounds, muttering syllables until at last, the wall of silence cracked. The stone became a voice. Suddenly, priests long dead were speaking again, their cosmic metaphors no longer mute. A little joke slides in. You imagine Champollion waking up after fainting, groggy, someone handing him water, and him mumbling, "But wait, did the falcon pronounce like pa or ba?" Even collapse couldn't dim his grammar fever. The fringe tidbit emerges. Some mystical thinkers argued Champollion hadn't merely deciphered an ancient script, he had reopened a cosmic channel. They claimed that once the hieroglyphs were spoken aloud again, they didn't just mean things, they did things. Words as incantations, capable of shifting energy, like keys unlocking dormant forces. Mainstream Egyptologist scoffs, but the idea lingers, especially when you remember that for Egyptians, writing itself was called Mita-Netjer, the words of the gods. Historians still argue whether Champollion appreciated that sacred weight or reduced hieroglyphs too much to phonetics. Did he liberate them, or flatten them into mere sounds? The truth, like always, is layered. He gave us letters back, but maybe left behind some of their cosmic grammar. Another obvious truth: translation is resurrection. To decipher a dead tongue is to raise its speakers like ghosts, to let them breathe again through your lips. That's why Champollion collapsed, not from exhaustion alone, but from the sheer weight of resurrecting an entire civilization. Your eyelids drift heavy now. You see him hunched over the stone, candle flickering, falcons and suns glowing like constellations on paper. He murmurs syllables, each one a star rekindling. When he finally slumps over, it isn't just a faint. It's the universe exhaling, a code at last made flesh again. You sigh, lulled by the thought. The Rosetta Stone wasn't just solved. It was awakened. The strange thing about Champollion's triumph is that it didn't quiet the whispers around the stone, it amplified them. Once the hieroglyphs started speaking again, scholars realized the language was not merely decorative or mystical but precise, full of verbs, prepositions, even casual little phrases. The cosmos had suddenly become conversational. You can almost hear ancient scribes chuckling. Finally, you get it. We weren't drawing pretty birds, we were writing receipts and tax forms too. An obvious truth: every civilization leaves behind grocery lists alongside scriptures. For every hymn to the sun god, there's a tally of grain or a note about fishing nets. The Rosetta Stone proved this balance, half divine poetry, half temple bookkeeping. Quirky tidbit: when Champollion began reading through other inscriptions with his new key, one of the earliest things he could translate wasn't a sacred hymn at all, but a royal brag about how many prisoners a pharaoh had captured. Imagine waiting 2,000 years for the voices of the ancients, and the first thing you hear is a flex about someone's win-loss record. Historians still argue whether the rediscovery of hieroglyphs stripped them of mystery or deepened it. Before Champollion, hieroglyphs were romantic symbols of cosmic wisdom. After him, they were letters and syllables, phonetic, almost ordinary. Did the magic vanish, or did the real magic begin when those voices finally spoke clearly again? Scholars keep circling that tension, unable to agree. Another obvious truth: once you translate something, you can't unknow it. The veil lifts, and mystery becomes memory. The Rosetta Stone carried Egypt from myth into language, but in the process, it lost some of its aura. Now, instead of hearing only whispers from the cosmos, you also hear tax codes and temple disputes. Still, that's the beauty. You picture Champollion grinning as he rattled off translations, ecstatic that this granite puzzle now unlocked not only royal decrees, but entire libraries of papyrus and temple walls. Suddenly, the cosmos of Egypt widened. Tomb paintings weren't just art, they were captions, instructions, names, and prayers. The silence of millennia cracked open, and the chatter poured out. A little joke slips in. You imagine an ancient scribe leaning forward through time, scolding modern scholars. Yes, decode our cosmic grammar, but also please note we left you an invoice for 300 baskets of barley. Don't forget to pay up. The fringe tidbit hums. Some esoteric readers claim that the real purpose of the stone was never political at all. They argue it was a teaching device, a cosmic classroom stone left behind by priestly astronomers, encoding not just translation but the structure of universal communication. In their view, Champollion only unlocked the surface. The deeper level, the star grammar, remains waiting, hidden in repetitions, numeric patterns, and alignments. Historians still argue how far we should stretch such claims. Is the Rosetta Stone simply a decree about temple privileges, or is it an intentional key to the cosmos? Most prefer the cautious answer, but the possibility gnaws at you. Why else would priests carve 3 scripts into a single slab? Unless they sensed it was more than paperwork, it was a model of communication itself. Another obvious truth: bridges matter. The stone built one across languages, across centuries, across earth and sky. Even if it's just a decree, it also embodies something bigger, the dream of connection. To stand before it is to feel that bridge under your feet, steadying you between the silence of the past and the chatter of the present. Your eyelids drift, heavy now, as you picture the Rosetta Stone glowing faintly in a quiet gallery. Its lines hum with chatter, not mystical thunder, but everyday voices of people long gone. In that hum, you hear both the sacred and the mundane, the cosmic and the human. A whole civilization comes alive again, not because of gods alone, but because of receipts, festivals, decrees, and dreams. You breathe slowly. The stone's magic isn't that it speaks only of stars. It's that it reminds you all words, even grocery lists, are fragments of the cosmos, waiting for ears patient enough to listen. You lean closer to the glass and let a mischievous thought stroll in on tiptoe. What if the Rosetta Stone isn't just a human artifact? Not built by aliens in the meme sense. No neon saucers, no gray tourists posing for selfies. But what if the symbols themselves whisper with patterns that feel just a touch off-world? You smirk at your own imagination, but you don't shoo it away. The gallery is quiet, you're breathing slow, and this is the hour when fringe ideas get bold. An obvious truth: humans are cosmic animals. We look up, we wonder, and when we don't know, we invent bridges made of story. Aliens, angels, time travelers, call them what you like, they're placeholders for mystery. The Rosetta Stone has carried enough mystery to fuel 1,000 theories. Why should the extraterrestrial ones feel out of bounds at midnight? You let the glyphs blur into constellations. The falcon becomes more than Horus, more than a phonetic shard. It tilts into a starbird you could imagine streaking between constellations. The snake lengthens into a spiral reminiscent of galaxies, coils that wind like cosmic DNA. The sun disk, the circles, the repeated patterns, they start to look like a language optimized not only for eyes and temples, but for minds that think in orbits and frequencies. You don't need to believe this to enjoy it. You just let the possibility sit beside you like a drowsy cat. Quirky tidbit: a handful of modern enthusiasts have pointed out that some hieroglyphic clusters resemble signal diagrams, stacked repeats, punctuated markers, and determinatives acting like parity checks in a transmission. They'll show you hand-drawn charts comparing Falcon Sun Serpent sequences to on-off gates, and for a delicious minute you believe them. Then you remember the demotic sticky note and the Greek subtitles and think, if aliens sent a message, would they also include line items about temple tax exemptions? Cosmic telecom with a side of bureaucracy is the most human thing imaginable. Historians still argue whether such resemblances are anything more than apophenia, the brain's hobby of connecting dots until a rabbit appears in the moon. Most Egyptologists will tell you the stone is exactly what it declares itself to be, a trilingual decree designed for earthly audiences. But even the sober scholars admit that Egyptian culture saturated everything with sky thought. If you live in a civilization that times life by Sirius and solstices, your writing will smell of the cosmos whether or not any ship ever lands. You breathe in and out, slow as the Nile, and test the alien hypothesis the way a jeweler tests a gem. Suppose, for argument's lullaby, that something non-human wanted to talk to us. How would it speak? Numbers, probably. Repetition. Redundancy across channels, in case one script failed. The Rosetta Stone, conveniently, is redundancy incarnate. 3 scripts, same message. If you squint, it's a model of robust communication, sacred imagery, hieroglyphs, quick shorthand, demotic, administrative clarity, Greek. A multi-layered packet. If you were transmitting across millennia, you'd approve of the design. But then your practical side taps you on the shoulder. An obvious truth. Extraordinary claims need extraordinary proof, and this slab is very earthly indeed. We know the workshop tools, the historical context, the decree's political payoff. We can track the priestly network that ordered copies across temples. We can follow Champollion, hunched and feverish, prying sounds from birds and suns until the language opens like a stubborn door. None of that requires a saucer idling over Memphis. A small joke floats up, soft as dust. If aliens had delivered a universal translator, would they have picked basalt or just dropped a user manual titled, How to Phone Home, Greek Edition, into the temple suggestion box? Still, you let the fringe idea breathe because it changes your listening. You start to hear the stone as a signal not merely from a king to his subjects, but from a species to itself. Humans telling humans, here is how to talk across divides. The trilingual stunt is our own alien protocol, a proof of concept that meaning can hop channels and survive empires. Maybe that's the real cosmic part. We didn't need visitors to teach us. We taught ourselves by carving redundancy into rock. The fringe tidbit returns with fresher clothes. Some esoteric readers argue that Egypt's initiatory schools framed hieroglyphs as star syllables, not because spacemen whispered in their ears, but because the act of writing itself felt like dialing the universe. Speak the right combinations, and you harmonize with sun, moon, Nile, almost as if you're tuning a receiver. Whether or not that's historically airtight, the metaphor hums. The stone looks less like a memo and more like a frequency map, an object that rings when you chant it. Historians still argue whether chanting inscriptions had ritual effects beyond psychology. Skeptics say the power is suggestion. Believers say vibration shapes reality. You, drifting at the edge of sleep, don't adjudicate. You just notice how repetition in the decree lulls like waves, how the triple scripts cradle the message like nested bowls, how your body relaxes when multiple languages agree on the same tune. If aliens wanted to soothe a nervous world, they might pick that trick too. Another obvious truth, tender and human. We reach for aliens when we're a bit lonely. The Rosetta Stone stares back at you across 22 centuries, and a silly part of your heart wants it to wink. Message received. You're not alone. Whether that wink comes from Orion, from the Nile, or from your own brain, inventing company hardly matters to your heartbeat in this moment. You think of our earlier jokes, the cosmic HR email, the dad joke hieroglyphs, the lion as celestial bouncer, and smile. Maybe the universe loves jokes because jokes jump gaps. A pun, a glyph, a triple script. Each is a bridge where meaning lands on more than one shore. That's alien enough for a Tuesday night. You try on one more angle. If aliens existed, and if they nudged anything here, maybe it wasn't content but impulse. Maybe the nudge was simply the human urge to translate, to aim light through 3 apertures, to make sure the message survives. That urge gave us Champollion's fainting, Demotic's humming shorthand, Greek's tidy bass line, and your sleepy certainty that words are boats. Boats that cross centuries. Boats that carry kings, priests, jokes, and star chants together. A final soft joke. If an alien walked this gallery tonight and read the plaque, it might whisper, "We didn't write this, but nice protocol. Apes." Triple redundancy. Approved. Then it would leave a comment card. P.S. Love the lion. You step back from the glass. The stone doesn't glow or beep. It just sits, heavy, quiet, persuasively terrestrial. And yet your chest feels a little lighter, because you've remembered what the alien hypothesis is best at. Not proving visitors, but proving longing. We long so hard that we build devices for survival. Temples aligned to sunbeams, decrees etched 3 ways, grammars that double as lullabies. Whether or not anyone else hears us, we have already learned to speak widely. The gallery hush deepens. You let the thought drift like a comet that won't quite collide. The Rosetta Stone remains what it has always been. Human hands striking meaning into basalt until the results sound like more than human. If that looks alien from far away, perhaps that's the compliment we've been chasing all along. You close your eyes and let the stone's triple text echo like 3 voices singing slightly out of sync. Hieroglyphs chant with birds and suns, Demotic hums in its quick cursive stride, and Greek declaims like a lawyer rehearsing in the mirror. Together, they sound like a choir rehearsing a cosmic anthem, each part different, yet somehow blending. You can almost feel the vibration in your chest, as if the gallery glass were a speaker and you're leaning close to catch the bass line. An obvious truth: harmony doesn't erase difference, it thrives on it. The Rosetta Stone worked precisely because the 3 scripts weren't identical twins. They were cousins who could still translate for one another. It's the ancient equivalent of closed captions, subtitles, and overdubs. Quirky tidbit: there are moments where the Greek text of the stone actually corrects or expands what's said in the hieroglyphic line. It's like watching a film with subtitles and noticing the translator sneak in a little footnote. Scholars chuckle about these script sibling squabbles, proof that even stone can't freeze perfect agreement. The cosmos must laugh too, 3 languages on one slab, still arguing across the millennia. Historians still argue whether the decree was primarily political theater or genuine religious devotion. Was it a clever way for Ptolemy's priests to butter up the king, or a heartfelt spiritual proclamation? The translation lets us read, but intention is slipperier than syntax. The stone might be both loyalty pledge and him, and we're left tilting our heads like confused cats, trying to parse the tone. Another obvious truth: translation multiplies meaning. Each shift into a new script adds a layer, a shimmer. Even when they're saying the same thing, each language breathes its own perfume. Greek with its rational clarity, Demotic with its scribal shorthand, hieroglyphs with their cosmic poise. Reading them in sequence is like tasting the same fruit cooked 3 ways: fresh, candied, distilled. You picture Champollion savoring those flavors, flicking from Greek to Demotic to hieroglyphs like a DJ sampling tracks. In his feverish notes, he wasn't just transcribing letters. He was listening for the hidden beat that runs through all language. The cosmic rhythm. A little joke slips in. You imagine the 3 scripts personified as roommates squabbling over chores. Greek says, "I'll explain it logically." Demotic grumbles, "I'll write it fast so we can eat." Hieroglyphs rolls its eyes and insists, "I'll draw it beautifully so the gods notice." Meanwhile, the decree about Ptolemy sits there like a passive-aggressive fridge note. The fringe tidbit whispers. Some esoteric readers propose that the triple form wasn't just practical, but deliberate initiation. 3 layers of reality encoded in stone. Hieroglyphs for the divine plane, Demotic for the earthly, Greek for the rational mind. Together, they map body, soul, and spirit. In this scheme, the stone isn't just a political decree. It's a cosmic sandwich, a triadic chant. Whether or not that's historically true, it certainly fits the Egyptian love of triads: Osiris, Isis, Horus, birth, death, rebirth, earth, sky, underworld. Historians still argue how far to take these symbolic parallels. Were priests consciously layering cosmology, or were they simply covering their communicative bases in a multicultural kingdom? The safe answer is the latter. But even cautious scholars admit that Egypt never separated politics from cosmology. When you pledge loyalty to a king, you're also tuning yourself to the stars. Another obvious truth: language always exceeds its function. Write a shopping list, and you still reveal your culture's grammar, your era's vocabulary, your quirks of handwriting. Etch a decree, and you end up mapping theology. The Rosetta Stone can't help but overflow. Your eyelids droop heavier. You imagine standing before the stone, but instead of words, you hear chords. Hieroglyphs ring like a high flute, demotic thrums like a cello, Greek anchors like a trumpet. Together, they play a cosmic lullaby, one that Ptolemy probably never intended, but one that humans across centuries now can't unhear. You let that lullaby rock you gently, its triple cadence steady as heartbeats. The stone becomes less a decree and more a choir. Three voices teaching you that meaning survives best when carried in layers, wrapped in harmonies, sung across empires. The gallery air feels cooler now, as though the stone itself exhales. You lean closer and imagine the decree not as words, but as an operating system booting up. Three languages etched side by side like redundant servers, each humming its own line of code, each backing up the other. It's less a royal brag and more a program designed to run across time. You feel like a sleepy IT tech, listening to the hum of an ancient mainframe, half expecting a green cursor to blink across the basalt. Input accepted. An obvious truth: humans always overbuild when they want permanence. We double-notch shoelaces, add backup hard drives, carve in stone when papyrus would do. Redundancy is survival, and the Rosetta Stone is survival on a cosmic scale. If the decree really was just about honoring Ptolemy, it's hilariously over-engineered. But if the goal was cosmic durability, well, it worked. Quirky tidbit: some Egyptologists note how the hieroglyphic section of the stone isn't simply a word-for-word translation of the Greek. It's grander, more elevated, with extra epithets for the king, more sparkle. In other words, it's not just translation, it's marketing. The gods apparently demanded a bit of poetic padding. Imagine a cosmic resume with buzzwords like innovative leadership and beloved of RA. Even eternity needed good PR. Historians still argue whether the stone was intended for everyday eyes or primarily for the priestly elite. Was it a street billboard, a temple notice board, or a sacred file cabinet? The answer matters, because if ordinary passers-by could read even part of it, then the stone was not just cosmic programming, but public broadcast. If only the priests decoded it, then it was a private channel, a kind of priestly LAN. Scholars fence endlessly, but the ambiguity lingers like static. Another obvious truth: meaning isn't just in words, it's in who gets to read them. Access decides whether a text is democratic or divine. The Rosetta Stone's trilingual nature might suggest openness, but maybe it was a mirage. 3 keys on a locked door don't matter if only the temple guards hold the handles. A little joke slips in. You picture the priests unveiling the stone in 196 BC like a new iPhone. Now available in 3 languages. Same great decree, optimized for your script of choice. No spiritual updates yet, but wait for version 2.0. The crowd gasps, then remembers they can't actually afford one. The fringe tidbit drifts into the room. Some theorists believe the threefold inscription encoded not just words, but energy harmonics. They argue that carving the same decree in 3 symbolic systems creates a resonance effect, like playing a chord instead of a single note. Each script vibrates on its own frequency, pictorial, cursive, alphabetic, and together they open a portal of sorts, syncing human voices with cosmic rhythms. It sounds wild, but when you hum 3 notes at once, you feel your bones tremble. Maybe the priests felt the same when they traced falcon, snake, and sun into the stone's skin. Historians still argue whether Egyptians thought of writing itself as literal sound trapped in matter. Was hieroglyphic carving a kind of recording device, a stone vinyl spinning sacred syllables forever? Some evidence points that way. Spells emphasize speaking the glyphs aloud, as if the writing itself were a sleeping singer waiting for breath. Another obvious truth: texts don't exist in silence, they exist in performance. A decree carved in basalt is useless until someone reads, chants, or even stumbles through it. The Rosetta Stone isn't just a slab. It's a microphone stand waiting for a voice. You let that image sink in. The gallery lights dim in your mind's eye, and the three scripts shimmer like colored bars on an old stereo equalizer. The stone hums faintly, waiting. Maybe Champollion wasn't the first to awaken it. Maybe every priest who read it out loud rebooted the cosmic program, aligning the kingdom not only with Ptolemy, but with the pulse of the stars. You breathe slow, lulled by the thought. Whether or not it ever opened a portal, the Rosetta Stone still vibrates in your imagination. A backup drive carved in basalt, a cosmic program still running after 2 millennia. You picture it whispering in 3 channels at once, soothing the night. Message received. Meaning persists. You set your palm to the glass and imagine the stone humming, a low, almost inaudible thrum, as if the rock remembers something the rest of us forgot. People often call it black basalt, though you've already learned it's granodiorite, a dark igneous cousin tough enough to laugh at chisels. Either way, igneous rocks can trap tiny iron-bearing minerals, little compass needles frozen in time. So your drowsy hunch tonight is simple. What if this stone carries a faint magnetic memory of the place and moment it hardened? And what if priests who love the sky also love the Earth's invisible field? An obvious truth: stones aren't just heavy, they're archives. Volcanic rocks cool and lock in whisper-thin alignments of magnetite grains, preserving the direction of Earth's magnetic field from the instant they pass through the Curie point. Archaeologists date hearths and kilns with this trick all the time. Baked clay remembers which way north was when it last saw real heat. So you stare at the Rosetta Stone and think, you, too, might be a compass that forgot how to point. You picture a priest lifting the slab's edge with a grunt, not because he's checking feng shui, but because he wants it set just so. Its face toward ritual east, its shoulder to temple north, its body squared with a cosmic grid more felt than seen. Historians still argue whether Egyptian builders paid attention to magnetism specifically or relied purely on the sun and stars. No extant priestly compass has turned up, and yet the alignments they achieved feel preternatural, as if they had more than one invisible thread in hand. Quirky tidbit: the ancients knew about lodestone's odd appetite for iron. Greeks wrote about it. Sailors in far-off China were already playing with compasses. But there's no clear papyrus manual titled How to Magnetically Align Your Temple in 3 Easy Steps. You smirk, imagining a linen-bound instruction booklet. Step 1. Rub your cat with amber. Step 2. Don't. That's static, not magnetism. You rest your forehead lightly against the cool barrier and let your mind glide into hypothesis. Suppose the granodiorite retained a whisper of remnant magnetization when it formed. Suppose a sensitive hand, or a ritual that happened to include iron needles, bronze filings, a bowl of water, could notice that whisper. Even if the priests never named it magnetism, they might have sensed a tug, a preference, a persuasion in the stone. Cultures often discover effects before they invent vocabulary. Fire burns long before oxidation shows up. A small joke pads in on soft paws. Your phone's compass sulks indoors if you wave a fridge magnet nearby, and you briefly imagine a temple custodian in 196 BC grumbling. Please keep your ceremonial magnets away from the decree. The stone, in your mind's ear, keeps humming. You think about resonance. Strike a tuning fork and a nearby fork will sing in sympathy. The quarry, the courtyard, the city, each has its own frequencies, set by shape, stone, wind, and traffic of feet. Could a slab as massive as this behave like a patient resonator, collecting tiny vibrations, chant, drum, footfall, the dim roar of a festival, and letting them kiss its lattice? That's when the fringe thought steps forward wearing sandals. Some enthusiasts mutter that quartz and feldspar, common in granodiorite, exhibit piezoelectric effects, meaning mechanical stress can coax faint electrical charges. If chants and drums married to sun and shadow can nudge a stone's charge or feel the hair's breath, might a ritual become a circuit? You don't have to buy the whole market to enjoy the window display. Historians still argue whether there's any measurable temple field effect. Engineers bring magnetometers to ruins and publish careful plots. Romantics bring flutes and publish poems. Read enough reports and your head tilts like a falcon glyph. Some sites show anomalies, some don't. And separating geology from ritual is like unbraiding the Nile. The sober reminder lands gently. Correlation isn't causation, and sleep is not peer review. Another obvious truth arrives like a soft bell. Alignment is a conversation. Sunlight pins a date, stars draw a direction, terrain whispers here. And sometimes the rock itself has preferences, in fracture lines, in bedding planes, in the way it cools and rests. The Egyptian genius lay in listening to all of that, the bright, the dim, the silent, and then fixing a building so the whole chorus sang. Whether magnetism was a named singer or just a bass note underfoot, the harmony is what you feel when you walk a temple axis at dawn. You can't help a second joke. Imagine booking the stone for a spa day, deep demagnetization, hot sand wrap, Gregorian, Memphite chanting included. The receptionist asks if you'd like to tip in Debens. Your mind flips to the workshop again. Chisels ticking, dust rising, copper ringing off hard mineral. Each strike is a shock, a tiny quake. If the rock did carry a delicate magnetic memory, did thousands of hammer blows smear the needles? Or did the craftsman, by accident, anneal a new preference, aligning work rhythms to the same east-west attention that ruled the courtyard? Historians still argue whether tool marks record choreography or chaos. You picture a foreman insisting on steady tempo, a practical decision that just happens to feel like a drum for the cosmos. The fringe tidbit sidles closer. Some modern ritual engineers, an odd phrase you admit, test stones with coils and microphones, claiming a sung tone can provoke measurable ticks in nearby fields. They talk about charging monuments like batteries with vowels, then reading that charge with copper loops. The data is murky, the videos are hypnotic. You keep 2 feet on the ground and let your ears borrow the romance. Maybe the words on the Rosetta Stone didn't only signify. Maybe they were meant to ring. Third joke, softly now, because your head is heavy. If the stone is an antenna, its streaming service is stuck on one channel, Ptolemy's greatest hits, remastered in 3 languages, and the cosmos won't let you skip the ad. Another obvious truth, almost sleepy. Even if none of this magnetic whispering is true, the desire for it tells you who the Egyptians were and who you are. They built in alignment because alignment feels like safety, like belonging, like your bed pushed flush against the wall of the universe. You long for that, too. So you put your life to a grid, calendar blocks, phone alarms, north at the top of the map, and you calm the inner Nile. You pull back, just an inch, and look again. The stone is still a decree. It's also still a star mirror in your mind, a grammar book, a choir. Tonight you let it be one more thing. A patient coil of mineral and myth that hums when people stand near and agree on something. On a king, on a festival, on a direction. Whether or not a magnetometer would cheer, your bones understand the instrument. The gallery is quiet enough to hear your own pulse. You picture the slab under torchlight 2,000 years ago, the air warm, a priest lifting his palm toward east, mouth shaping the first line. The chant rises, the crowd answers, the granite keeps a secret straight face, and maybe, just maybe, a hidden needle in its heart quivers for a breath, points where the world begins and is still. You slump back against the gallery bench, your eyelids heavy, and picture the Rosetta Stone not as an object, but as a portal. The text isn't static, it shimmers, a gate disguised as grammar. Imagine the 3 scripts are keys meant to be read in a specific cadence. Hieroglyph, demotic, Greek, as if chanting in 3 octaves at once. The room tilts gently, like a ship on slow waves, and for a moment you feel the stone swing open like a door on heavy hinges. An obvious truth. Language isn't just description, it's action. Say, I promise, and suddenly a promise exists. Say, I do, and suddenly there's a marriage. Say, I sentence you, and a whole legal reality drops like a curtain. The Rosetta Stone is a performative text on steroids. By inscribing the king's divine honors in 3 tongues, the priests didn't just record loyalty. They enacted it, re-anchored the cosmos with every syllable. Quirky tidbit. The decree includes instructions that statues of Ptolemy be set up in temples, and that the decree itself be copied and placed in every major shrine. You can practically imagine ancient FedEx couriers schlepping mini roses around Egypt, each one another node in the cosmic Wi-Fi network. If your temple didn't have the slab, you weren't online. Historians still argue whether this replication was truly carried out at scale. Very few sibling stones survive, most lost to time, quarrying, or being repurposed as house bricks. Some scholars think thousands once existed. Others think only a ceremonial handful. The debate hovers unresolved, like a half-decoded glyph. Was Egypt wallpapered with decrees, or was the Rosetta Stone always rare? Another obvious truth: repetition spreads power. Whether slogans, prayers, or decrees, what matters is not just what is said, but how often and how widely it's heard. The Rosetta Stone was a broadcast tower in stone form, transmitting Ptolemy's cosmic branding. Every priest who read it aloud rebooted the ritual software. You grin at a small joke. You imagine some ancient teenager graffitiing on a temple wall. Seen it. Heard it. Rosetta at again. Even in sacred times, someone was surely rolling their eyes at repetitive messaging. The fringe tidbit drifts in, almost conspiratorial. Some esoteric readers propose the stone wasn't just meant to multiply copies physically, but to resonate cosmically. By repeating the decree across scripts and temples, priests were allegedly writing it onto the sky itself, like engraving code into constellations. In that view, Orion, Sirius, and the Milky Way aren't just stars. They're stone texts stretched across darkness. Read them correctly, and the cosmos echoes the same loyalty to Ptolemy. Sounds outlandish, yes, but it suits Egypt's obsession with as-above so-below symmetry. Historians still argue whether Egyptians consciously intended such astral mapping. Some evidence suggests processions and rituals aligned with stellar risings, so the step from aligning a temple to aligning a decree isn't impossible. Still, we lack a papyrus memo titled Cosmic Broadcasting for Beginners. You shrug. It's speculation, but it keeps the night drowsy and rich. Another obvious truth: texts don't just sit there, they ripple. The Rosetta Stone rippled through priests, through temples, through scholars millennia later. Its magic lies in scale. One slab in Memphis echoed into 100 in shrines, then into Champollion's fevered notebooks, and now into your sleepy head tonight. That's how words survive, by rippling. You soften your gaze, and the hieroglyphs blur into star dots. Demotic squiggles like meteor trails. Greek blocks shine like constellations you half recognize. The slab's surface turns into a night sky, and the decree into a star map. You lean forward, trying to read it like a horoscope written by basalt. Second joke: gentle as a lullaby. You picture the priests reminding villagers to look up and recite the decree to Orion. Please face star number 37 in the hunter's belt and repeat after me. Ancient sky theater, part politics, part bedtime story. The stone glows dimmer in your imagination, as though the portal it hinted at is closing again. Still, you're left with the lingering thought that texts aren't dead weight. They're doors. Sometimes they open to bureaucratic paperwork, sometimes to cosmic resonance, sometimes both at once. Historians still argue whether Champollion himself glimpsed that duality. Did he see the stone as just a key to language, or did he feel the whisper of ritual power hiding in the repetition? His notebooks suggest excitement more than mysticism, but then again, fevered dreams often smuggle in the strangest truths. Another obvious truth, final for this section: you can't decode the cosmos all at once. You get slivers, syllables, hints, whispers, like light leaking through a cracked door. The Rosetta Stone is one such crack, a door ajar. And while you may not walk through, you can lean close and feel the draft of another world. Your breathing slows, the bench seems to cradle you, and the stone hums softly in the dark, not just a decree, but a portal disguised as punctuation. The museum's hush folds around you, and you let your thoughts drift deeper. If the stone is a portal, maybe what lies beyond isn't some literal wormhole, but a library without walls. You imagine stepping through the basalt surface into an endless archive where every symbol, Egyptian bird, demotic squiggle, Greek letter, floats in the air like glowing fireflies. You wander among them as if inside the operating system of the cosmos, each glyph a folder you could open if only you knew the password. An obvious truth: writing is humanity's most stubborn form of memory. Oral tales shift with every storyteller, but stone refuses improvisation. The Rosetta Stone proves that permanence was a priority, not because the decree itself was uniquely vital. How many royal proclamations does the world forget daily? But because the Egyptians understood memory as power. Fix a decree in 3 scripts, and you multiply its survival odds the way modern cloud servers mirror your photos in 3 data centers. Quirky tidbit. Scholars once believed that hieroglyphs were purely symbolic, mystical pictures with no phonetic component. They thought the bird glyph was just birdiness incarnate, not a consonant sound. This mistake lingered for centuries, partly because it was so charming. Who doesn't like the idea of a cosmic emoji system? It took Champollion to insist. No, these pictures also spell. They talk in syllables as well as symbols. The revelation was like finding out your favorite mural is secretly a karaoke screen. Historians still argue whether Champollion got every detail right. His breakthrough was immense, but new papyri and better imaging suggest refinements, corrections, even outright errors. Scholarship is a relay, not a sprint. Each generation edits the cosmic dictionary, and the Rosetta Stone remains the dog-eared first volume. Another obvious truth: no code stays cracked forever. Even after a triumphant breakthrough, languages evolve, scholarship shifts, interpretations wobble. The stone isn't a final word. It's an open beta, always patching itself. You smirk at a sleepy little joke. Imagine if the stone had software updates. Version 196.1. Minor bug fixes, improved demotic legibility, added one new glyph for Falcon. Priests gather around like Apple fans at a keynote. The fringe tidbit sidles in. Some modern esoteric schools propose that hieroglyphs weren't just phonetic or symbolic, but vibrational. Each glyph, they claim, is a frequency key, like a tuning fork in picture form. Carve the glyph of the sun, and you invoke not just the word Ra, but a resonance with solar energy itself. If so, the Rosetta Stone isn't a decree at all. It's a set of activation codes, written 3 times to ensure proper ignition. Whether you believe it or not, the idea adds a shiver to the gallery air. Historians still argue whether Egyptians themselves believed writing had inherent magic. Evidence leans yes. They spoke of the divine words and treated certain spells as dangerous unless properly sealed. To carve was to conjure. A chipped glyph could neutralize a curse, like cutting a wire in a bomb. So perhaps the stone did hum, not because of magnetism, but because people believed it did, and belief, repeated widely enough, has a gravity of its own. Another obvious truth: human belief shapes matter. Pilgrims wear steps into stone stairs. Millions of touches polish bronze statues smooth. A decree repeated across centuries doesn't just linger. It transforms the thing it's written on. The Rosetta Stone is not just text. It's text that has been stared at, whispered to, touched, sketched, photographed, translated, and dreamed about. You feel it in your bones. It's heavier than basalt. It's weighted with attention. Second joke, a bit wry. You imagine if objects could roll their eyes, the Rosetta Stone would sigh. Yes, yes, I'm famous. Please stop tracing me with your greasy fingers. Your breathing slows as you picture that cosmic library again. You step between glowing glyphs, and some of them flicker like constellations, groups of stars rearranging into words. The stone was never just about Ptolemy. It was a rehearsal for translation itself, for bridging gulfs. A dictionary carved into granite, left like a breadcrumb trail for whoever found it millennia later. Historians still argue whether we should call Champollion the sole decoder, or whether earlier scholars deserve more credit. Some say Thomas Young unlocked the door and Champollion ran through. Others insist Champollion alone found the master key. The debate smolders like old incense. The stone itself, silent, doesn't care who translated it. It only cares that someone did. That meaning kept rippling. Another obvious truth, closing this stretch: the Rosetta Stone doesn't belong to Ptolemy anymore, or to priests, or even to the British Museum. It belongs to the continuum of meaning itself. Whoever leans close to its carved skin becomes part of the archive, part of the cosmic translation project. Tonight, that includes you. You let your shoulders sag, lulled by the image of floating glyphs. The stone glows faintly in your mind's eye, a login screen to the universe, still waiting for the right password. You let your eyes half close and imagine Egypt as a slow, shifting sea of sand and silt where stories sink and surface by their own tides. The Rosetta Stone is the celebrity that made it to London, but the decree it bears wasn't meant to be a one-off. Copies were to be set up in temples throughout the land. a constellation of black slabs standing in courtyards from Delta marshes to Upper Egypt's glare. You picture them as night beacons, each one repeating the same script in 3 voices, each one another mirror of the sky. Then you picture time doing what time always does, toppling, burying, repurposing, forgetting. An obvious truth: Egypt is a palimpsest. When a kingdom blinks, the next writes on top. Stones are reused as thresholds and lintels. Sanctuaries become quarries. Inscriptions turn into the backs of mills. You can almost hear a pragmatic foreman in some long-vanished village, tapping a carved slab with his heel and announcing, "Perfect height for a step." The cosmos shrugs. Eternity is patient. Quirky tidbit: travelers' notes from centuries past casually mention inscribed blocks being used as donkey tether posts, garden benches, even the base of an oven. One man's sacred decree is another man's sturdy countertop. You smile because of course that's how it goes. If you've ever used a stack of books to prop up a wobbly table, you already understand cultural stratigraphy. Historians still argue whether dozens, hundreds, or only a few copies of the decree were ever set up in the first place. The text says many, but many is a slippery word when the Nile keeps changing its mind about where to lay its mud. Some scholars imagine a country sprinkled with trilingual slabs. Others suspect a ceremonial handful placed at marquee temples. The truth flickers somewhere between, a mirage just above the heat shimmer. You let your thoughts sift down into the delta, where land and water play chess. Marsh grass hides whatever it can. Fishermen pull up chunks of carved stone with their nets and shrug. Canal diggers knock a corner off an inscription and keep shoveling. In your mind, you see a fragment lying face down beneath a field, the hieroglyphs pressed against cool earth, the Greek letters sleeping in mud. Above it, a farmer walks his furrows and never knows he's pacing on a page of the cosmos. A small joke tiptoes in. Imagine a temple's groundskeeper 2,000 years ago, swearing that he definitely chained the spare decree to the column right here, and now it's gone. Borrowed for someone's cousin's doorway. Ancient lost and found is just as chaotic as ours. You drift across centuries to the age of surveyors and trowels, of notebooks and grid squares. Archaeologists arrive with string lines and patience, the kind of patience that makes a desert look like a library. They kneel, scrape, brush, bag, repeat. Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear wide-brimmed hats and sunscreen that smells like seafront candy. The work is less Indiana Jones and more quiet meditation, parceling the earth into stories. If they find a trilingual fragment, it isn't destiny. It's persistence measured in blisters. Beyond hand tools, your mind invites the new devices in. Ground-penetrating radar whispering through courtyard floors. Magnetometers strolling like dowsers with data. Drones lifting their insect hum over tell mounds. Satellites peering at crop marks where buried walls cheat the plants into greener rows. Each technology is another candle in the dark. You imagine a ghostly rectangle on a radar printout. The right size, the right depth, and an archaeologist's pulse jumping, just a little. Another obvious truth: not everything hidden wants to be found by you. Floods lift, crumble, and scatter. Salt blooms eat away inscriptions. Sun bakes and sand scours. People tug at stones because people need houses. Even when a slab survives, it may be face down forever, protected by the very forgetfulness that steals it from us. The cosmos is thrifty with its archives. Fringe tidbit. Now and then, a rumor surfaces, an old photograph of a courtyard with a dark block tucked under a stair, a fisherman's tale of a heavy, lettered stone hauled from a canal and traded for a goat, a monastery storeroom where an inscription leans quietly behind a cupboard. Your rational mind raises an eyebrow. Your dreamy mind adds pins to an imaginary map and whispers, "Road trip." You wander in your head to tiny village mosques built with spolia, older stones folded into newer faiths, and to sugarcane fields where harvesters pause at a glint in the dirt. Somewhere, a child chalks a game board on a smooth black surface and plays until dusk. Somewhere else, a mason flips a carved block and finds its back conveniently flat. The decree survives, not as shrine, but as utility. If texts are living things, this is a life too, propping up thresholds, hosting teacups, taking the weight of daily feet. Second joke: soft as the delta air. Picture an ancient homeowners association memo. Please refrain from using sacred decrees as garden pavers. The board recommends uninscribed limestone for patios. Violators to sacrifice one goat or file an appeal in triplicate. You feel the tug of the river. The Nile doesn't move like a clock. It wanders like a cat, affectionate and fickle. Channels silt, banks crumble, islands are born and vanish. A decree erected in a sunlit court can be knee-deep in mud a generation later. You stand there in your imagination, watching men with baskets lift the earth away in slow choreography, and for a moment you see a corner of granodiorite wink at the light like a waking eye. Historians still argue whether. You begin to murmur, then finish the sentence in your head, whether modern salvage should pry such stones out of village walls or leave them be as part of living heritage. Museums promise preservation. Communities ask why the past must always travel. There's no tidy answer. A slab is safer behind glass, but a text within its land breathes a different air. You let the debate hang, like laundry fluttering between rooftops. Another obvious truth: loss is not the end of meaning. Even when the physical stones are gone, the idea of their network keeps working on you. The notion that a decree could lace a country together like stars in a constellation. The missing points become invitations. You can connect them in your mind, and the pattern still holds. Third joke, barely a smile. If you ever do stumble on a trilingual doorstep during your vacation, do not attempt to smuggle it in your carry-on. Airport scanners may be blind to poetry, but they are very good at noticing 760 kilograms of granite. You lean back into the hush. The gallery glass reflects your face. Behind it, one survivor of a lost family dozes in artificial light. You whisper a small vow into the quiet, to keep looking gently, to believe that somewhere a sister stone still waits for its morning, to trust that the river is not only a thief, but also a custodian who returns things when the hour is right. In your mind you write a note to the unknown slab. We are still listening. Perhaps that is all any lost stone needs, to be imagined, to be expected, to be sung to across the years. If sound can shape sand and rumor can steer a trowel, then maybe your lullaby is a tiny lantern for some future dig. The night deepens. You breathe in, out. The Rosetta Stone doesn't stir. But in the delta wind, a farmer pauses, a shovel schemes a corner, and silt slides away from a sleeping script. The cosmos is patient. Constellations take their time to rise, and so do the words that mirror them. You blink slowly, the room hazy around you, and let your thoughts wander toward the scholars who have circled the Rosetta Stone like moths to a night lamp. It isn't only the archaeologists with dust on their boots, but the theorists, the armchair dreamers, the cosmic philosophers who insist that the stone isn't just a dictionary but a dialogue. You picture them leaning forward in candlelit libraries, scribbling notes in margins, eyes shining with the sort of half-mad wonder that keeps coffee pots emptying until dawn. An obvious truth: whenever humans crack one mystery, we immediately invent three more. The stone was meant to solve one problem, language, but instead it opened a floodgate. If a decree in 3 tongues can revive hieroglyphs, might other artifacts be keys to other hidden grammars? Could there be a Rosetta Stone of the stars, one that translates constellations into syntax? Quirky tidbit. In the 1970s, fringe theorists claimed the stone's proportions match astronomical ratios, like the tilt of Earth's axis or the distance between certain planets. No one proved it, of course. It was math stretched like bubblegum, but it makes you chuckle to imagine priests sneaking in coded references to orbital mechanics while praising Ptolemy. Imagine an ancient scribe muttering, "Sure, I'll carve your titles, but I'm also slipping in the recipe for calculating solstices." Historians still argue whether such cosmic speculation honors or distorts the artifact. Some insist the stone is strictly political, a royal decree, period. Others shrug and admit Egypt was never shy about folding the cosmos into politics. After all, to call a king the beloved of Ra is both propaganda and astronomy. The line between myth and mathematics is always sandier than we think. Another obvious truth: symbols refuse to stay in their lane. Once carved, they invite interpretation far beyond the author's control. A decree becomes a star chart. A prayer becomes a spell. A sketch becomes an omen. The Rosetta Stone has become all three, depending on who stares at it long enough. Your mind drifts to a playful joke. You imagine an Egyptology conference coffee break where one scholar insists it's purely linguistic, while another waves a laser pointer at a slide of Orion's belt shouting, "No, it's a sky manual." Meanwhile, a third just wants more pastries. Academia is eternal. The fringe tidbit takes you further. Some modern esoteric circles believe the stone is part of a triad, not unlike a trinity of cosmic artifacts. One is the Rosetta Stone itself, symbol of language. Another is the Antikythera mechanism, symbol of calculation. The third is lost, a supposed cosmic mirror that symbolized vision. Together, they argue, these were gifts left by either advanced humans or visitors from beyond, breadcrumbs in basalt and bronze. Mainstream historians roll their eyes so hard you can hear them, yet the story persists, a bedtime tale with just enough plausibility to make you peek under the bed. Historians still argue whether even Champollion, rational as he was, ever felt that tremor, that sense he wasn't just translating but trespassing into something larger. His notebooks read like the work of a man racing not only rivals but also shadows. Perhaps he felt the stone's gravity but lacked the words to frame it as more than grammar. Another obvious truth: people hunger for meaning that stretches past the horizon. A plain decree about taxes and statues will not lull us to sleep. We want the sky in it, the hum of eternity, the whisper that maybe someone beyond the stars once cared to write to us. The Rosetta Stone is irresistible precisely because it straddles that line between paperwork and portal. You chuckle at a second joke. If aliens truly left us a cosmic memo, of course we'd trip over it while quarrying for building stones. And of course it would end up shipped to Britain with a customs declaration reading "Granite slab, damaged." You picture the stone's inscriptions as layers of voices. The priests chanting loyalty to Ptolemy, the scribes carefully carving, the French soldier digging it up, Champollion murmuring syllables, fringe theorists whispering about orbits and aliens. And you, now, leaning closer in the gallery hush. All of you are readers, each with your own flashlight, each illuminating different corners of the same carved sky. Historians still argue whether the stone deserves its singular fame when hundreds of inscriptions survive. Perhaps its celebrity is an accident of timing and circumstance. But accidents can be cosmic too. Sometimes the universe stacks the dominoes for you. Another obvious truth: soft as a lullaby. Even if the stone is only a decree, your imagination is not wrong for seeing stars in it. Meaning multiplies when it's believed in. A slab can be a tax record and a telescope, a political decree and a prayer. Humans live in layers. You let your gaze soften until the hieroglyphs shimmer like constellations, demotic curls like flowing rivers, Greek blocks like building stones of thought. For a drowsy instant, the Rosetta Stone is no longer an artifact at all, but a mirror that reflects exactly what you're searching for, whether that's language, stars, or simply the gentle hum of continuity across millennia. And that, perhaps, is its greatest trick. It makes you believe you've decoded something essential, even if what you've really decoded is yourself. The air around you feels heavier, as though the museum lights dimmed a notch, though you know it's just your mind leaning deeper into the haze. You picture the Rosetta Stone not in its glass case, but reimagined as a cosmic ledger, a stone spreadsheet where gods and humans alike kept track of who owed what in the great dialogue of the universe. Lines of hieroglyphs, demotic curves, and Greek blocks arrange themselves like columns in Excel, only instead of numbers it's frequencies, star coordinates, and whispers from beyond. An obvious truth: people can't resist turning the unfamiliar into a tool they already understand. We mapped myths into constellations because stars are easier to read if you pretend they're shaped like hunters or scorpions. We treat sacred decrees like cosmic manuals because manuals are how we survive IKEA furniture. The stone has been remodeled 100 times over by our own imaginations. Quirky tidbit: during Napoleon's expedition, some officers joked that the stone might be a bill of lading for Pharaoh's groceries. They weren't entirely serious, but it shows how quickly even professionals reduce mystery into everyday banter. Imagine telling a guard that you've been assigned to protect the universe's most famous multilingual cosmic memo, and he mutters, "Looks like a receipt to me." Historians still argue whether this tendency to trivialize or mythologize serves scholarship or derails it. On one side, grounding the stone in everyday terms keeps it relatable. On the other, cosmic speculation invites larger patterns to emerge. Is it safer to treat the slab as a ledger of temple politics, or bolder to wonder if it resonates with the sky itself? The academic tug-of-war has never quite stopped. Another obvious truth: meaning thrives in the tension between the practical and the fantastical. The Rosetta Stone could be simultaneously boring and sublime, like a tax return written in starlight. You smirk at a joke drifting in like incense. If aliens really wanted to send us a message, why not just beam down a podcast? Hello humans, thanks for tuning in to Cosmic Weekly. We've hidden 3 stone manuals near the Nile. Good luck decoding. The fringe tidbit floats closer. In the mid-20th century, one eccentric researcher claimed the spacing of the hieroglyphic lines echoed radio wave harmonics. He argued that the priests had carved a broadcast into stone, a kind of static-free cosmic FM station. Mainstream academia groaned, but he spent decades charting glyph distances as though tuning a dial. You imagine him hunched over with a ruler, swearing that a falcon glyph hummed at 1420 megahertz, the hydrogen line beloved by astronomers searching for extraterrestrial chatter. Historians still argue whether to even acknowledge such work. Some say it's distracting pseudoscience. Others say fringe theories keep curiosity alive. After all, every radical discovery once looked absurd. Champollion himself, muttering about phonetic signs and hieroglyphs, sounded like a crank to his peers before he proved them wrong. Another obvious truth: laughter is often the first reaction to new truth. The stone teaches you to hold mockery lightly. What seems silly tonight might be orthodoxy tomorrow, or at least a fresh metaphor to help someone else dream. A second joke rolls in. You imagine archaeologists running double-blind studies on glyph frequencies. Control group: please stare at demotic for 15 minutes. Experimental group: focus on the ibis glyph. Report whether you feel cosmic vibrations. Snacks afterward. Your thoughts slow into softer currents. You see the stone's text not just as languages, but as waveforms. Hieroglyphs like jagged mountains, demotic like rolling hills, Greek like steady brick walls. Together, they make a kind of visual symphony, a carved equalizer frozen mid-song. You wonder if the priests felt the music in their bones as they carved. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian temples themselves were tuned, designed for acoustics that carried chants like thunder. Some researchers swear certain halls amplify specific frequencies. Others dismiss it as tourist trap mysticism. Still, you picture the decree's words booming inside a stone chamber. The bass rumble so deep it rearranged sand on the floor like cosmic sheet music. Another obvious truth: sound is half of meaning, even when the text is silent. To carve words without voice is like building a ship that never sails. The stone waited centuries for someone, Champollion, then you, to give its words breath again. You grin at a third joke, weary but warm. Imagine the stone sulking for 1800 years, then perking up in 1822. Finally, someone pronounced my lines correctly. About time, you slowpokes. The fringe thought stays with you. Maybe carving itself was the broadcast, the grooves acting like vinyl records pressed into basalt. To run your finger along the text is to touch the ridges of an ancient soundtrack. You imagine lowering a cosmic needle onto the stone, hearing not music but layered voices, priests, kings, scribes, archaeologists, dreamers, all overlapping into a lullaby. Another obvious truth: softer now, whether or not the cosmos encoded a message in it. The Rosetta Stone teaches you this. Translation never ends. Every reader is a new frequency. Every decade retunes the dial. And in your half-sleep, you're simply the latest tuner, leaning close, listening for the faintest hum beneath the letters. Your breathing evens out. The museum hush feels almost like static, that soft background hiss between radio stations. Somewhere in that static, you almost hear the stone sighing with relief. Yes, you're still listening. Your eyelids droop, yet the narrative refuses to let go, tugging you further into the possibility that the Rosetta Stone isn't just a translator's dream, but a piece of a much wider puzzle. You picture it as a shard of an enormous mosaic, one that might stretch across continents and epochs, linking civilizations like beads on a necklace. If this slab is a key, then what great locked door was it meant to open? An obvious truth: civilizations rise, trade, borrow, and bleed into one another, even when they pretend they don't. Egypt wasn't sealed in amber. Greek sailors walked its harbors. Persians invaded its temples. Romans scribbled their graffiti on its columns. To carve a decree in Greek alongside hieroglyphs was already an admission that borders are porous. Language itself is a highway for ideas. Quirky tidbit: some late Victorian theorists suggested that the Rosetta Stone was deliberately designed as an export edition of Egyptian wisdom, a kind of ancient user manual for foreign dignitaries. They imagined copies sent abroad like deluxe hardcovers, each a showpiece of cosmic and political literacy. There's no evidence, of course, but you can't help picturing a Ptolemaic ambassador unwrapping a 760-kilogram gift and grumbling. Couldn't they just send papyrus? Historians still argue whether the decree reflects genuine piety or pure propaganda. Was it priests sincerely honoring the boy king, or bureaucrats ensuring tax breaks and temple privileges? One camp insists on sincerity, another on cynicism. The truth is probably both. Humans have always managed to mix devotion with opportunism, sometimes in the same sentence. Another obvious truth: every artifact is both sacred and mundane. A decree praises a monarch while also codifying tax exemptions. A star map is a guide for farmers and a myth for poets. The stone, no matter how cosmic we dress it up, still functioned as paperwork. Paperwork is eternal. A joke sidles in. Imagine aliens descending after millennia, scanning the stone, and reporting back to their mothership. Their interstellar communique is mostly about tax relief and birthday parties for Pharaoh. Cosmic letdown of the century. The fringe tidbit is stranger. A few fringe historians have tried to link the stone to the Mayan stele in Central America, arguing that the three-tiered writing parallels the Mayas' glyphs, phonetics, and calendrical notations. They whisper of a universal template, 3 layers of meaning across 2 continents. Mainstream scholars roll their eyes, but the symmetry tickles the imagination. Perhaps cultures naturally invent triplets of language when trying to bridge earth and sky. Historians still argue whether such parallels are coincidence, diffusion, or pure fantasy. The safe bet is coincidence, but the lure of a grand unifying script is hard to shake. After all, once you find one Rosetta, you start hunting for the whole quarry. Another obvious truth: humans are obsessed with finding patterns, even when the patterns are accidents. It's what makes clouds into dragons and spilled coffee into maps of secret islands. The stone, heavy as it is, floats in that same imaginative ocean. You chuckle softly at another joke. You imagine an overeager theorist insisting that traffic lights descend from the Rosetta Stone because they too use 3 layers: red, yellow, green. Cosmic code cracked. Somewhere, Champollion facepalms. Your thoughts slow into drifting constellations. You imagine a line from the Rosetta Stone stretching to the Antikythera mechanism in Greece, then onward to Babylonian star tablets, and finally to Vedic hymns about the cosmos. Each artifact another verse in a sprawling universal epic. Even if the connection is only poetic, isn't poetry itself a kind of truth? Historians still argue whether we should even pursue these cosmic comparisons. Some warn against turning scholarship into science fiction. Others note that science fiction often becomes science fact given enough patience. The line between heresy and hypothesis is as thin as papyrus fibers. Another obvious truth: you don't need proof to feel wonder. Whether the stone is a cosmic key or just bureaucratic granite, it still sings to you because it reminds you that humans have always craved to make sense of things bigger than themselves. The third joke slips in gently. Imagine if another Rosetta Stone turned up tomorrow, but instead of Greek it carried emojis as the third script. Suddenly deciphering ancient Egyptian becomes a matter of crown plus heart plus sparkle equals beloved of RA. Archaeologists might finally recruit teenagers for help. The fringe thought lingers. Maybe the stone's cosmic role isn't about hidden math or alien codes, but about modeling translation itself, showing that truth is never locked in one language, one culture, one lens. If the universe has a message, perhaps it too comes in multiple scripts: physics, myth, poetry, all saying the same thing in different alphabets. Another obvious truth: you, tonight, are part of that chain. You're not an Egyptologist, not a priest, not a stone carver. Yet here you are, translating the stone into drowsy imagery, into whispers for your own mind. The code continues through you. Your breathing deepens. In the hush, you can almost hear 3 layers overlapping. The hieroglyphic rustle of reeds, the demotic murmur of market chatter, the Greek cadence of philosophers, all braided together. It's not just a decree. It's a lullaby written in triplicate, sung by earth, water, and sky. You sit a little straighter and let another question slip in like a tide at night. If the Rosetta Stone taught you how to translate the past, how would you translate us for the cosmos? If a star somewhere is listening the way you've been listening, what would you carve, beam, or bottle so an unknown mind could say, "Ah, I get them"? You glance at the stone's 3 bands and imagine a 21st century version. Call it Rosetta 2.0, built not of granodiorite, but of everything we've learned about redundancy, clarity, and charm. An obvious truth: when you don't share a language, you start with patterns, numbers, primes, ratios, the hydrogen line at 1,420 megahertz, the beat of pulsars. Math isn't our mother tongue, but it's the least parochial accent we've got. You picture the first layer of Rosetta 2.0 as pulses and pictures, a grid, a circle, a sequence, the way the Arecibo message stacked dots into a human figure, DNA, a solar system. You smirk, remembering your earlier joke about cosmic HR emails. You'd still lead with hello, but now in arithmetic. Then you add a second layer, the demotic of the stars, everyday sensory data. Sounds of rain, a heartbeat, laughter. The taste of words is tricky to export, but waveforms travel well. Quirky tidbit: when the Voyager Golden Record left Earth, it carried 116 images and an hour and a half of audio. Greetings in dozens of languages, thunder, whales, Johnny B. Good, and even the recorded brainwaves of a human in love. You imagine an alien stylist tracing those grooves and pausing at the laughter, puzzled, then delighted, then maybe a little jealous. A mixtape for the neighborhood, mailed without a return address. For the third band, the Greek of our time, you'd include instructions, because bureaucracy is eternal. How to decode the other 2 layers. How to reconstruct our centimeter from wavelengths. How to convert a pixel grid to a face. How to interpret a map that points back to our pulsar-anchored corner of the galaxy. You smile at the thought that your cosmic memo still needs a how to read this memo. At least some habit scale. You imagine where to put it. A radio burst through the dark? A durable plaque on the moon? A tiny archive cached in the cool shadow of a crater, engraved in nickel, sapphire, or diamond? Because basalt's great, but micrometeorites don't care about your nostalgia. Redundancy again. Beam it, bury it, and bolt it to a probe. If ancient priests taught you anything, it's that one channel is stingy. The universe deserves a chorus. A light joke pads in. You consider attaching a universal skip ad button, because if an alien spends 10,000 years decoding your hello only to get an autoplay about tax exemptions, you're not making friends. You let the thought widen. Sending is only half the enchantment. Receiving is the other half. If something answers, will you be able to read it? Your stone trained you to expect triplicate. So you picture their message in 3 modes too. Something you can count, something you can hear, something you can observe. Maybe a brightening star that hums at prime intervals, plus a radio whisper riding the hydrogen line, plus an image that unfolds from a set of rules. The first time you catch it, you'll doubt your instruments. The second time, you'll doubt yourself. The third time, you'll cry a little and then start sharpening pencils. Historians still argue whether the Rosetta Stone should stay in London or return to Egypt, whether a global museum best preserves it, or whether the stone's meaning breathes differently in its homeland. Ethics, law, and love get all knotted up. You feel that knot too. Your imaginary Rosetta 2.0 tightens it further. If meaning gains power in place, then a cosmic message perched on the moon says one thing, and the same message bolted to a satellite says another. Place is part of grammar. You learned that back with the temples and sun shafts. Architecture as syntax, horizon as clause. You glance back at tonight's running jokes, cosmic HR memos, lions as bouncers, magnetism spa days, and realize humor is a stealth codec. Another obvious truth: jokes bridge gaps quickly. A pun, a rhythm, a mild absurdity. These leap across difference because they tease pattern, then twist it. Would an alien laugh? You don't know. But you'd risk one gentle gag, the way Voyager risked Chuck Berry. Worst case, your neighbors think we dance funny. A second joke, because you promised yourself lightness. If you mailed aliens a PDF, they'd reply asking for the password, then ghost you for 12 millennia. Better to send grooves and pulses. Not everyone agrees about sending anything. Scientists bicker kindly and sometimes not so kindly about messaging extraterrestrial intelligence. Is it brave to speak up or wiser to listen quietly? You remember the priests balancing taxes with starlight and feel the same itch. How do you honor prudence without starving wonder? The Rosetta Stone's triple speak didn't erase risk, it managed it. So your Rosetta 2.0 would be modest, but multiply redundant, cautious in content, but generous in invitation. A hello with a dimmer switch. You breathe and let the artifact in front of you come back into focus. The real slab. Chipped top, glitter of feldspar like a scattered Milky Way, 3 registers steady as a heartbeat. A practical decree that turned into a dictionary that turned into a mirror. It trained you for this moment. To think in layers, to prefer harmony to unanimity, to treat translation as an act of faith. Another obvious truth slips in soft as silk. Every time you learn someone else's words, you get a bigger sky. You let a fringe thought land, light as dust. What if the cosmic language you keep chasing isn't math or glyphs at all, but redundancy itself? The habit of saying important things in multiple ways so they survive storms, empires, and misunderstandings? By that measure, the Rosetta Stone was already speaking starlight. Not because owls equal Orion, but because 3 voices agreed long enough for millennia to pass. Agreement is how meaning beats entropy. Third joke, drowsy as a cat. You imagine the lion glyph from earlier lounging at the gallery's edge, flicking its tail, purring. When you draft Rosetta 2.0, put me on the cover. Test audiences love a feline. Marketing, eternal as pyramids. You picture a last scene. The stone spends a quiet night under museum LEDs. Somewhere, a radio dish watches a patient patch of sky. Somewhere else, a tiny spacecraft schemes the heliopause carrying a golden mixtape that includes thunder and a kiss. In a village by the Nile, a farmer leans on a shovel and tells a child a story about a buried black rock that once talked. The child laughs. The shovel bites earth. The dish keeps listening. The mixtape keeps sailing. You stand here, whispering at a slab, designing a hello you might never hear answered. And yet you feel oddly full. You came to a rock and found a method. Start with something many minds can share. Repeat it in 3 registers. Be kind about your instructions. Leave room for jokes. Place it where light, time, and strangers can find it. That's not just a way to speak to stars. That's a way to speak to each other. You exhale. The stone stays silent, which is not the same as quiet. Its calm is a kind of grammar, its gleam a kind of promise. If the cosmos ever writes back, you'll know where to stand to listen. Here, at the fault line between bureaucracy and wonder, with your ear pressed to a very patient rock. The museum glass blurs as your vision drifts, and in the haze the Rosetta Stone seems to ripple like a pond struck by starlight. You blink once, twice, but instead of granite you now see a horizon, a desert night under a dome of sky, so clean you can count faint stars that city dwellers only dream of. You're no longer in a gallery. You're standing where priests might have stood, on sand still warm from the sun, the stone freshly carved and catching moonlight. An obvious truth. Humans have always tried to tether heaven and earth. The pyramids align with cardinal points, ziggurats rise like staircases to constellations, and Stonehenge marks solstices with eerie precision. The Rosetta Stone may look bureaucratic, but it lives in that tradition of making rock listen to the stars. It's a ledger on one hand, but on the other, it's a mirror angled toward the night sky. A quirky tidbit hovers. Some fringe writers once claimed that the Rosetta Stone was never meant to be read horizontally, but vertically, like a staff of music, with the 3 bands forming harmonies instead of translations. They said the priests weren't just recording decrees, they were playing the cosmos like an instrument, each script a note and a chord. Mainstream scholars laughed it off, but the metaphor lingers. What if meaning was sung as much as written? Historians still argue whether Egyptian scribes saw themselves as mere record keepers or as mediators between the mortal and the divine. One side paints them as glorified clerks with good penmanship. Another insists they were magicians, channeling speech into permanence. The truth, as always, probably slides between both. Another obvious truth: writing is a spell. You etch sounds into matter and expect them to survive storms, empires, even boredom. Every sticky note on a fridge shares DNA with this basalt monolith. The only difference is durability, and maybe glamour. You let a joke rise, sleepy but sharp. Imagine explaining emojis to a priest. Yes, this skull means death, but also laughter. Depends on context. The scribe stares, horrified. You shrug. Languages evolve, buddy. Deal with it. The fringe tidbit spins darker. There are whispers that the Rosetta Stone could be a seed crystal for a larger lost archive. Some theorists imagine entire walls of similar stones, all broken, buried, or melted into lime. What if this one slab is just a surviving appendix of a cosmic library? The missing volumes leave you leaning forward, wondering what symphonies of translation were pulverized into mortar for Cairo houses. Historians still argue whether the stone's discovery was dumb luck or inevitable. Egypt is littered with fragments, but this one happened to carry 3 tongues at once. Was it pure chance, or was someone, priest, mason, or fate, stacking the odds? Scholars won't agree, but the romantic answer is tempting. Maybe the cosmos planted redundancy as breadcrumbs. Another obvious truth: survival is biased. Things that last look intentional, even when they're accidents. A child's doodle in durable pigment might outlast a king's decree on fragile papyrus. You remember this every time you wonder if our own digital files will survive, or if some stray meme will end up as Earth's lasting epitaph. A second joke wanders in. Imagine an alien digging up our servers, decoding terabytes, and deciding humanity's most sacred scripture is cat videos. Honestly, not the worst legacy. Your breathing slows, your ears filling with phantom desert winds. You hear faint chants, as though priests once stood around the fresh stone reciting its decree under the stars. You picture their voices weaving with cricket chirps and jackal howls, a kind of accidental symphony. The stone wasn't mute in its youth. It vibrated with human voices, temple acoustics, cosmic resonance. Historians still argue whether ritual recitations mattered more than the text itself. Was the writing permanent, or was the performance the true meaning? A decree unread but repeated might matter more than one written and ignored. Scholars volley, but both possibilities make the stone feel alive. Another obvious truth: permanence isn't just about stone, it's about repetition. You repeat lullabies to children not because they forget, but because permanence is built from rhythm. The stone's triple script is its own lullaby. Say it 3 times, and it might last forever. Your mind drifts to a third joke. What if the cosmos itself runs on redundancy? Stars flare, die, and flare again. Galaxies form spirals as though tracing the same doodle over and over. Maybe the universe is that student who copies notes thrice just to be sure. The fringe thought expands. Perhaps what you're decoding isn't just a decree, not even just a cosmic language, but a pattern of how meaning endures, layer, repeat, diversify. The Rosetta Stone didn't only preserve a message, it modeled resilience. You begin to sense that the cosmic language is less about glyphs or primes than about strategy. The stone says, here's how to survive misunderstanding. Say it again, in another way, and again, in yet another. Another obvious truth: your own thoughts tonight are layered like that. Jokes, facts, fringe speculations, stacked in triplicate until even your half-asleep mind grasps something deeper. The stone has made you its mimic. The desert night fades. You're back in the gallery, the stone under its quiet glass, but the sky still hums in your head. You lean closer, your reflection faint over the polished basalt, as though you've become the 4th script, written in breath on glass. Your body is heavy now, each blink a negotiation, but the stone insists you hold on just a little longer. You notice how the room hums faintly, air ducts, footsteps, the vibration of a city at night. The stone seems to breathe with it. Maybe that's fitting, because for all its grandeur, it has always lived in the noise of the everyday. An obvious truth: the Rosetta Stone was never built to be mystical. It was a government circular. Do this, honor that, don't forget your taxes. A slab of compliance, not prophecy. Yet here you are, centuries later, whispering about cosmic codes. Ordinary things accrue magic the longer they survive. A receipt today, an oracle tomorrow. A quirky tidbit drifts in. In the 19th century, enterprising showmen made miniature plaster copies of the stone and sold them like souvenirs, long before merch was a thing. You could own a chunk of bureaucratic basalt on your mantle, impress your dinner guests with Champollion's notes, and pretend you were in on the secret. A tourist economy around cosmic speculation. That's about as human as it gets. Historians still argue whether Egyptologists leaned too heavily on the stone when reconstructing hieroglyphs. Some insist Champollion over-romanticized his work. Others argue he underplayed the luck factor. Either way, the stone wasn't the whole key, just a particularly shiny tooth on a much larger gear. The debate itself is telling. We want singular heroes, but decipherment was more like a chorus. Another obvious truth. Every translation is approximate. You never really crack a code, you negotiate with it. Meaning leaks, slips, dances. Even now, scholars refine hieroglyphic translations, adjusting tone and nuance like musicians tweaking pitch. The stone was a doorway, not a destination. A light joke strolls in. Imagine if the decree, once perfectly translated, turned out to be riddled with typos. Oops, we meant festival on the 25th, not the 23rd. The cosmos waits millennia for clarity, only to learn humans can't proofread. The fringe tidbit is tempting. Some believe the stone's chipped top originally carried a celestial diagram, stars or planets etched above the decree. No proof, but the dream persists, that the cosmic layer was literally knocked off, lost in some lime kiln. You picture it glowing faintly under dust somewhere, just waiting for a lucky shovel. Historians still argue whether the stone was displayed publicly or tucked away in temple archives. Was it propaganda billboard or priestly reference book? Each scenario paints a different role. One shouts to the crowd, the other whispers to the initiated. Neither answer diminishes its gravity. Both are part of its layered personality. Another obvious truth. Context changes everything. A rock in a temple is sacred. The same rock in a ditch is debris. The stone didn't change, but its story did, depending on who was watching. That's true of people too. You shimmer differently depending on the room. Second joke for the night. Imagine the stone had a Yelp review. Too heavy, inscriptions repetitive, customer service of Pharaoh unimpressive. 2 stars. The priestly PR team would not be amused. You glance at its gouges, its scars, its missing crown. Each wound is part of its endurance. You can't imagine it pristine. Imperfection is what made it portable, noticeable, survivable. The chipped top is the price of future meaning. Historians still argue whether we romanticize ruins too much. Do broken edges really deepen mystery, or do we just project our hunger onto the gaps? The stone makes the case that gaps are part of the message, absence as eloquent as presence. Another obvious truth. Survival is selective, not generous. The cosmos doesn't keep everything. Yet what remains is enough to suggest patterns, like stars surviving daylight. You don't need the whole song to hum the chorus. Your third joke comes out slow, drowsy. If someday aliens do reply, they might send their version of a Rosetta Stone, a monolith with 3 layers of cosmic bureaucracy. And when we translate it perfectly, it might just say, "Welcome. Now please file Form B-42 at the Galactic Customs Office." Bureaucracy, it seems, is truly universal. The stone rests. You feel its patience, not like silence, but like a clock with no hands, content to wait for readers it cannot imagine. You realize you're part of that long relay. Priests to scribes to Napoleon's soldiers to Champollion to curators to night owls whispering at their screens. The stone doesn't know you, but it has trained you to carry its method. Your eyelids flutter. For a heartbeat, you imagine yourself carved into its basalt, your reflection fossilized as the 4th script. Modern, human, fleeting. Someday another will lean close, trace the layered grooves, and find you there, part of the chorus of voices who turned paperwork into poetry. You rest your hands on your knees and take one last, slow look at the stone. The gallery's hum is softer now, like an ocean heard through a shell. Security will sweep the room soon, but for the moment it's just you, the glass, and that stubborn slab that turned paperwork into a planetarium. You exhale, and the pain fogs a fraction, your breath sketching a ghostly fourth band over the three already carved. You've been circling a question all night, lazy spiral like a vulture in warm air, and now it lands. If there is a cosmic language hidden here, what, exactly, does it say? An obvious truth first, because truths love the front row. Every message that survives is a duet, cinder and care. Priests sent, stone cared. Soldiers stumbled, savants copied, scholars argued, curators guarded. You listened. Meaning crossed centuries the way the Nile crosses seasons, by repetition and attention. The stone's cosmic trick wasn't a secret alphabet from Orion, but a method any species with opposable thumbs and insomnia can learn. Say the important thing more than once, in more than one way, and place it where light can find it. You smirk, small joke number one. As you picture the slab unlocking like a phone. You swipe, it doesn't budge. Face ID, denied. Triple script passcode required. The falcon looks pleased with itself. Your eyes skim the grooves, and you hear all the callbacks like friends leaning in. The lion guardian at the threshold, Sirius blinking the river awake. The demotic sticky note, the Greek subtitles, those cosmic HR emails. Even the magnetism spa day you promised the stone. The comedy of it softens the artifact until it feels conversational, almost shy. You don't need it to beam star coordinates anymore. You just need to remember how it taught you to listen. Quirky tidbit to tuck under your tongue. Museum guides sometimes point out that people reflexively whisper around famous objects, even when there's no rule to, as if the thing were sleeping or praying. The Rosetta Stone collects whispers the way obelisks collect sunlight. Your voice drops of its own accord, because somewhere in your bones you're convinced volume can erase, but softness can store. Historians still argue whether the stone belongs in this city or by the Nile, whether a world museum best safeguards a world treasure, or whether an artifact sings truest in its home air. The debate is a tide. You felt it push and pull through several sections now, and tonight you realize the cosmic language has an opinion without taking a side. Translation wants proximity. It wants bridges. Whichever shore the stone stands on, the task is the same. Write, copy, teach, invite. Make the gap walkable. You lean closer until your reflection stitches with the letters. For a drowsy instant, your face is part owl, part sun disk, part Greek omega, a tired emoji the priests didn't predict. You grin, small joke number two. If emojis ever do end up on a future Rosetta, may the gods help the poor alien who has to parse skull equals laughing. In your head, you try to say the decree in the language of tonight. Not Ptolemy is merciful or holiday exemptions apply, but the thing the triple band keeps humming under the bureaucratic melody. It isn't theology, it isn't astronomy. It's a housekeeping note from the universe pinned to your fridge. Translate yourself. Translate each other. Build redundancy into kindness. Carve your promises in more than one medium. Voice and touch, paper and stone, humor and clarity, so they last past the first storm. A fringe tidbit flutters at the edges like a moth that can't decide on a lamp. Some modern seekers sit in front of photographs of the stone and meditate, swearing they dream in glyphs afterward, conversations with ibis-headed scribes that leave them calmer in the morning. You don't have to believe in downloads from Thoth to admit the effect is real. Stare at this thing long enough, and you start tidying your inner desk. The stone is a filing system for all. Another obvious truth lifts its hand politely. Not everything needs cosmic intent to have cosmic use. The priests could have been purely practical, loyalty codified, taxes clarified, and still built an arc that ferried meaning across 2 millennia. That's almost funnier than any alien hypothesis. We made a miracle by doing admin with style. Small joke number 3 arrives right on cue. If you ever do write Rosetta 2.0, put terms and conditions in a fourth band no one reads. Some traditions are sacred. You stand, knees creaking, and the floor cools your soles through your shoes. You imagine the slab back in a courtyard, sun prying at the glyphs, priests chanting, a boy king learning to keep his chin level. You imagine Champollion clutching his papers until his hands shake, certain and terrified in equal measure. You imagine the quarryman who hauled this rock, swapping jokes about spilled beer, then turning serious as the first bird took wing on its surface. You imagine all of them inside you now, condensed into a single habit. When you care, you repeat. When you repeat, you remember. When you remember, you keep. Historians still argue whether hieroglyphs were ever meant to be fully decoded by outsiders, whether secrecy was part of the point. You tilt your head. Maybe secrecy is overrated. The stone looks happiest when it's being explained to strangers. It's a social creature trapped in basalt. Translating it isn't theft, it's feeding time. You press your fingertips lightly to the glass. No smudges, you're civilized. And in that small, warm, human touch, the grand idea shrinks to something you can carry down the stairs and into the weather. Talk to people in the language that lets them hear you. That's it. That's the star sentence. The rest is calligraphy. Security's shoes squeak at a distance. The room tilts back from myth to building. You mouth a tiny thank you no one sees, and the stone, being a rock, does not bow. But the flecks of feldspar wink like a star seen through tired eyelashes, which is close enough. You turn toward the corridor where exit signs promise a different kind of constellation, neon instead of Orion, and you feel weirdly rested despite the hour. One last obvious truth to pocket with your keys. You won't remember every theory from tonight. You won't keep the decan count straight. You'll probably forget which band is Greek unless someone points. But you'll remember the feeling of a method lodging in your chest like a compass needle settling. Layer what matters. Repeat it kindly. Put it where the light is good. Leave room for jokes. That's not just how to read a stone. That's how to live a life that outlasts your own bedtime. You nod to the lion bouncer from earlier. Yes, you can keep watch while I sleep. And you smile at the cosmic HR memo pinned forever in granite. You step away, already translating tomorrow into 3 scripts. The practical plan, the human warmth, and the small gesture angled toward the stars. Let the edges soften now. Let the gallery walls blur back into a gentle hush, and let the stone, with all its grooves and glints, drift a little farther away, not lost, just pleasantly distant, like a lighthouse you've already passed. Your breath lengthens without effort. Your shoulders loosen their grip on the day. The questions can idle. The debates can fold themselves into neat, quiet squares. You've listened enough for one night. Imagine, just for a moment, that the room around you is a shallow tide pool of calm. Every sound that used to snag you, air vents, footsteps, the rustle of jackets, stretches into long, harmless threads, then dissolves. The stone is steady somewhere behind your eyelids, not demanding, not lecturing, merely patient, as if to say that meaning will keep until morning. You've already tucked the simple part into your pocket. Speak in layers, be clear and kind, let humor breathe, and face the light when you can. The rest is optional. Let your thoughts unspool into softer shapes. A falcon gliding in slow arcs, a river turning in its sleep, a single star choosing not to twinkle quite so brightly. The lion at the threshold yawns and lays its head on its paws. The words carved in granite relax into warm sand, and the sand becomes a pillow that knows the curve of your cheek. Even the old arguments, those busy historians in your head, trade footnotes for blankets and drift off mid-sentence. There is nothing to translate right now. No decree to copy, no compass to adjust. The cosmic language can hum without you for a few hours, and it will be glad to meet you again when you wake. For tonight, the only sentence that matters is the one your breathing writes. In and out, slow and sure, safe and home.